You quit your job? Does that mean you're going to rely on me to live? No, that's not true. I'm just changing careers. It doesn't mean I won't earn money. You're going independent? Seriously? That'll never work. Well then, maybe you should go independent from me too, huh? Are you talking about divorce? Because I'm not going to support someone without a job. My name is Lisa, I'm 40 years old, and I balance work and raising my daughter. I didn't work for a while after she was born, but when she started elementary school, my old job took me back. I mostly work from home now. My daughter is in 6th grade, and now that she's older, I feel ready to try something new in my career. My husband is also 40. When we got married, he worked as a salesman and earned well early on. 3 years ago, he switched jobs, hoping for a bigger paycheck, but things didn't go as planned. His salary is lower now, the benefits are worse, and he works long hours. My family lives in the countryside and are farmers. My daughter loves visiting them and helping in the fields. My parents enjoy having her around, and they love working with her on farm chores. But my husband hates the countryside and refuses to visit my parents' house. One day, I told him, I'm going to my parents' house for a week. Want to come? No, I've got work to do. A project is wrapping up soon, he replied. All right, got it. I knew he wouldn't come, but I felt it was polite to ask. While my daughter and I were at my parents' house, my husband called every day, not out of love or concern, but for silly reasons. What should I eat? There are leftovers in the fridge. I don't feel like eating those. Then cook something. Why should I? I'm tired. Okay, well, you've worked hard. Or, where are my clothes? In the drawer, as always. Why did you fold them like this? You didn't even try. All right, you're on your own, then. He always complains like this when I'm gone. I mostly ignore his calls and texts, but it's frustrating. He also dislikes when my daughter and I visit my parents, because every time we return, the house is a disaster. Mom, whenever we visit Grandpa's house, Dad leaves everything messy, my daughter said. Yes, he does, I admitted. Why do you always clean it up? He made the mess, so he should clean it, right? You're right, I said, feeling tired of it all. Even though we enjoy our time at my parents' house, it's always disheartening to come back to a dirty, chaotic home. My daughter feels the same way. Yeah, Mom hates it too, my daughter said with a frown. Then she asked, Hey, can we live at Grandpa's house? Grandpa and Grandma must have a hard time working in the fields. I wish I could help them. Thank you, I replied with a smile. Grandpa and Grandma would love that. My daughter is so thoughtful and kind, completely different from my selfish husband. I realized I was growing tired of his childish behavior. After our trip, I went to my workplace to talk about my health checkup and work goals for the year. My daughter's words about helping her grandparents inspired me to pitch an idea to the company president. Why don't we use our program to make agriculture more IT-oriented? I suggested. That's an area other companies have been working on for a while now, the president replied. He was right. Overseas, this has been done for decades, and Japanese companies have been exploring it for the past 10 years. I believe we can make it work with the patents we hold, I said. We already have farmers willing to participate in the project as a model. All right, the president said. Can you submit a proposal? Of course, I responded enthusiastically. I immediately reached out to my parents to ask for their help with the project. They agreed without hesitation. My daughter's heartfelt wish to support her grandparents turned into a fantastic business opportunity. A month later, my project was approved. From then on, I poured myself into the work. I wanted this project to succeed, not just for my career, but to ease the workload on my aging parents. But my husband wasn't supportive at all. In fact, he tried to bring me down every chance he got. You're acting so full of yourself lately, he sneered. Am I? I replied calmly. I don't like it, he continued. You're getting carried away. Maybe, I said. Your face is so annoying, he added. Well, if it ruins your mood, you don't have to look at me, I shot back. I knew his real intention, he just wanted to make me feel small, but I wasn't going to let him. I felt awful, just like my husband wanted me to, but I didn't show it. I kept my tone neutral and treated him as if nothing was wrong. He had always been like this. Whenever I seemed happy or successful, he would jump at the chance to bring me down. I was used to it by now, so I didn't let it affect me, but my calm response only made him angrier. Huh? I can't just not look at you, we live together, he snapped. That's not true, I said. You can stay in your room. I can take care of myself and our daughter just fine. If you took care of yourself, we wouldn't even have to interact. That's not what I meant, he yelled, his voice rising. His shouting made me angry too. I'd thought about divorcing him many times, but I didn't know how to explain it to my daughter. I hesitated. Then he crossed the line. Maybe the reason you don't understand things properly is because you grew up on a farm in the countryside. He was acting like a child. Usually, I would brush off his remarks, but insulting my parents really got under my skin. Still, I stayed calm. I was too focused on my work to let his childish behavior ruin my mood. For the first time, one of my proposals had been approved, and I was working on a project I truly cared about. But he kept pushing. So, can't you do your job because you're from the city? I asked sarcastically. You're crossing the line, he snapped. That's funny, because you were the one who crossed it first, I replied. We'd been arguing more and more lately. He used to be a kind person, but he started to change just before he switched jobs. Even though my relationship with him was deteriorating, my work was thriving. A few months later, I resigned from my company. After consulting with them, I signed a licensing agreement and decided to go independent. I had told my husband about this beforehand, but apparently, he hadn't been listening. The moment I quit, he exploded. You quit your job? Does that mean you're going to rely on me? No, I said. Going independent is like a career change. It doesn't mean I won't make money. Independent? Are you kidding? That'll never work. Then why don't you go independent from me too? I shot back. Huh? Divorce? I'm talking about divorce. I'm not supporting someone unemployed. His sudden demand for a divorce left me speechless. I hesitated, thinking about my daughter. But then, my daughter, who I thought was asleep, stepped into the living room. Mom, get a divorce, she said. My husband looked startled. I didn't do anything wrong. It's her fault for quitting her job, he said defensively. But my daughter ignored him and looked at me. Are you sure? I asked her. Yes, she said firmly. I want you to divorce. I don't like him. He's always mean to you. Mom, don't stay with him because of me. Let's leave right now, she added. We can go live with Grandpa and Grandma. Thank you, I said, touched. But you'd have to change schools. Are you okay with that? Of course, I'm fine with it. Let's go. You don't have to talk to Dad anymore. I nodded. All right, I guess that's it, I said to my husband. We'll figure out the details later. Hey, he started. Oh, God, what? I said, cutting him off. It's not my fault, he shouted. Okay, I said dismissively. We'll talk later. I hope you can live a life you won't regret. Huh? Whatever. I'll be free once you're gone, he muttered. I turned away from him, packed what we needed, and left with my daughter. At my parents' house, my daughter settled in quickly. Much to my relief, she adjusted well to her new school, and I started building our new life. Once she was comfortable, I met with my husband again to finalize the divorce. My husband refused to pay alimony, claiming it was my fault. He didn't seem to understand what liable even meant. I'm going to charge you alimony, I said firmly. Huh? Because you're liable, right? He retorted. No, you are, and clearly, you don't know what you're talking about, I replied. How am I liable? I didn't do anything, he argued. Exactly, you didn't do anything, no help with the house, no support with our daughter. I did all the work, but you did make time for Mary, didn't you? I said, putting evidence of his affair on the table. What? How did you get this? Did you steal my phone? That's so rude, he snapped. Excuse me? I'm rude? You're a married man, and this is what you've been doing. And no, I didn't steal anything, I said. You're unemployed. How'd you even hire a detective? It wasn't me, I said calmly. It was our daughter. What? She told me she saw you walking arm in arm with a woman she didn't know. She synced your phone to my laptop and showed me everything, encouraging me to divorce you. I stared at him coldly. She hates you. She's disgusted by you as a father. So now, I don't have to hesitate. I'm divorcing you, and I have all the proof I need. His face went pale as I continued. You're not just a lousy husband. You're a terrible father. How could you let your daughter see those pictures of you? Oh, and I also know about the affair that led to your job change. You've been paying alimony to the husband of your affair partner, haven't you? You even lied about your salary being reduced. I've looked into everything. At this point, his arrogance crumbled, and he nodded reluctantly. I'm proud of our daughter, I added. She's sharp and brave. I'd be thrilled if she takes over my company someday, if that's what she wants. Sorry, he mumbled weakly. Sorry won't fix this, I said. Let's not play games. I'm not stopping the divorce, and you're the one in trouble. If you don't pay alimony and child support in full, I'll go straight to your company and tell them everything. That shut him up. Hey, if you do that, I'll lose my job. Then maybe it's time you start job hunting again. You'll regret this for the rest of your life. My husband tried pleading with me, but I just smiled and brushed him off. He refused to sign the divorce papers at first, so I hired a lawyer and let him handle it. Within 2 weeks, the divorce was finalized. My ex-husband, already burdened with 2 other alimony cases and child support, couldn't afford more legal trouble. Facing financial ruin, he finally paid me alimony and child support in a lump sum. He had to go into debt to do it and even tried to gain my sympathy, but I ignored him. I also filed for alimony from his cheating partner. This led to a massive fight between them, and they broke up. Furious, she complained about having to pay but eventually borrowed money from her parents to settle it. I heard she moved back to the countryside to help with her family business, where her parents could keep an eye on her. As for my ex-husband, he couldn't afford his apartment anymore and had to move into a rundown one. Meanwhile, my business is thriving, and life feels brighter every day. My parents are thrilled because the IT system I implemented has drastically reduced their workload on the farm. It's rewarding to see my skills benefiting my family and our business. Through it all, my daughter has been my greatest ally. She's only 12, but her maturity amazes me. She was the one who encouraged me to leave her father and helped gather the evidence I needed. While it's sad she had to witness such a negative side of her father, she's used the experience to grow stronger. She loves spending time in the fields with her grandparents, but has also taken an interest in my work. Recently, she asked me to teach her how to make a website. I'm excited to see where her curiosity and talents will take her in the future. My daughter is truly exceptional, and I hope the adults around her will continue to nurture her. She inspires me every day, and I'm so proud of the person she's becoming.
At 34, Ted considered himself both fortunate and successful. He was the head of a large company that sold components and spare parts for various types of equipment, and he lived in a luxurious 2-level apartment in the city centre. His life was, in a word, idyllic. However, there was a downside to his happiness that Ted chose not to dwell on. The foundation of his prosperity was the capital earned by his father-in-law, Alison's father, not him. Ted reassured himself that few people could achieve such success at his age, regardless of how it was acquired. Ted was born and raised in the working outskirts of the city. His family consisted of a perpetually tired mother who single-handedly raised 2 children and an older brother who was lazy and avoided his studies from a young age. Compared to his brother, Ted was considered more capable, knowledgeable, and promising, and hence the minimal expectations placed on him. Ted grew up almost entirely by himself. He didn't cause much trouble, and from a young age he knew he needed to escape the crowded suburb. He searched for ways to achieve this, sometimes even against common sense. Ted's academic performances were average, but he excelled in the humanities, more than in exact and natural sciences. His mother, always on the brink of poverty, couldn't afford tutors. As a result, Ted struggled with subjects like algebra, geometry, physics and chemistry. However, after school he chose to become an electrician and managed to enroll in a relevant school. However, his studies didn't go too well, as he was often distracted by his attention to the girls. The girls he was dating with were similar to him, young, carefree, and not overly concerned with moral values. They enjoyed their time together without making any long-term plans or considering starting a family. Around this time, Ted's older brother committed a serious crime. Not just a minor prank. He and his friends robbed a home appliance store, for which he was sentenced to prison. Their mother, in an attempt to help her older son, sold her small apartment and used the proceeds to buy a tiny studio in an old apartment building in the same neighbourhood. She gave the rest of the money to a lawyer in hopes of appealing the case. Unfortunately, whether she was misled or the lawyer was incompetent, nothing changed. The older son remained in prison, and it became clear to Ted that there was no space for him at home. Thus he realized that adulthood had begun for him, whether he was ready for it or not. Ted began working at an early age, taking on any jobs he could. He started by carrying crates of fruits and vegetables to the market for a few pennies. He helped unload trucks full of household chemicals and walked dogs for others. He also distributed leaflets and handed out advertisements on the streets as a promoter. Despite trying to balance these jobs with his studies, his academic success was getting worse. However, with difficulty, he did graduate from school. Ted landed his first official job at a local enterprise. Although the pay was not substantial, especially for a novice specialist, it was enough for him to get by. The problem was that he could no longer use the student dormitory, so he needed to find his own place to live and pay rent. With his first paycheck, Ted rented a tiny room in a shared apartment. The rest of his earnings were quickly spent. This rash expenditure was a one-time event. Afterwards, he began to work and manage his finances more wisely, eventually saving some money for the first time in his life. Despite his efforts, Ted struggled with his personal life. The women he liked would go on a few dates with him, but then they often stopped communication or didn't respond to his calls. Aware of his financial limitations, Ted understood that he couldn't fulfill the expectations of many women. He could only afford to dine out once a month, and seldom bought flowers or gifts, which women tend to appreciate. Ted knew that if he lowered his standards and dated not marshmallow air creatures, but girls from his circle or even from work, he might have more success. He tried this a couple of times, but was quickly disappointed. He believed he deserved more than ignorant women who often neglected their appearance and used foul language. So Ted remained single, continuing his search for a significant other. He lived this way for about 2 years. During this time, he got used to the fact that he could safely provide himself not only with a place to live, but also with good food, clothes in season, and a little entertainment. He even had some free time. In his little world, Ted was happy. However, soon everything started to fall apart with alarming speed. The company that once provided a young man with employment and income suddenly collapsed. It was revealed that the owner owed a significant amount of money and had only selectively paid taxes. Soon, law enforcement agents visited the company. Within a week of this event, Ted, along with many of his colleagues, found themselves jobless and lost his income, which he needed for rent and food. Ted began job hunting, but luck was not on his side. He was willing to work as an electrician, but could not secure a position due to stiff competition. Potential employers considered him too young and unpromising, preferring more experienced candidates. Eventually, Ted took a job at a construction site, hoping to work as an electrician. However, he was only accepted as a helper. He worked there for a week until payday. Instead of receiving his earned money, Ted was given a promise and reassurance that he would be paid soon. This was not what Ted had anticipated, as he had been eagerly waiting his paycheck while surviving on meagre resources. Chance decided his fate. One day, with only some change in his pocket, Ted wandered through a snowy park, torn about what to do. He had almost no money left, and if he didn't get paid again, it would be a disaster. His mother offered no help. She made it clear that he was on his own, as she was already burdened with feeding herself and his incarcerated older brother. In her eyes, Ted was an adult who had to fend for himself. His work troubles were unimportant to her, compared to the mess his brother had gotten himself into. As Ted thought over his options, a small dog darted past him, its leash trailing behind. The incident happened so quickly that Ted barely had time to register it. He just noticed the dog's pink jacket and surmised that it must belong to a well-off woman, having seen similar dogs while walking other people's pets for a small fee. The owner soon arrived, a tall, slender girl, dressed elegantly, but not ostentatiously. Ted assessed this stranger with a keen eye and immediately stepped aside so as not to obstruct her path. He realized at first glance that this girl was out of his league. She was too fashionable, too affluent, and too wealthy for a simple labourer like him. Regardless, he wished he could engage in conversation with her. She had an open face, a kind look and a pleasant appearance. As she approached, it became clear that she was quite young. No older than 20 years old. When she spoke, Ted was taken aback. "Hello, could you tell me where the dog in the pink overalls ran off to? She slipped the leash and ran away." The girl spoke calmly, slightly out of breath from her brisk walk, but without the haughtiness often displayed by girls of her status. Ted, of course, was eager to assist, showing her where the dog had run. After hearing her hurried thanks, he plucked up the courage to offer further help. "Do you need help finding your dog? I have experience communicating with dogs." He didn't wait for a response and instead headed in the direction where the small dog in pink overalls had run off, although it was certainly not the dog that occupied his attention, but its owner. The girl, a head shorter than Ted, accompanied him. Her eyes were continuously scanning the surroundings for her pet. Delicate and captivating, she was quiet throughout, whether due to her reserved nature or preoccupation with her missing dog. Ted too remained silent, worried that a wrong move might ruin the connection they formed over the past few minutes, a bond built on their shared mission to find her runaway pet urgently. As their search yielded no results, Ted found himself hoping for the search in the park to extend. Perhaps then he could strike a conversation with his charming companion and get to know her better. The idea of asking for her phone number didn't even occur to him. He wouldn't dare to dream that far. As if the dog had heard Ted's silent pleas, it didn't appear anywhere. The girl, visibly worried, kept anxiously turning her head and looking out for her pet. "Don't worry," Ted reassured her. "We'll find your dog. It just needs a bit of time. She ran past me so quickly, I barely had a chance to see her. Stay calm and we'll search this place methodically." "Thank you," the girl replied politely, brushing a thick strand of shiny brown hair from her forehead. "This isn't even my dog, which makes it twice as scary. A friend of mine asked me to walk her dog while she and her boyfriend were at the country club. They don't allow pets there. So I took Berta out for a walk and she ran away. What am I going to say when my friend gets back? What am I going to do?" "We'll find Berta," Ted reassured with a frown, ready to do whatever it took to bring back the missing dog and to see the stranger smile. For half an hour the young people scoured the park, searching beneath every bush, tree and bench, but the dog in pink overalls was nowhere to be found. It was as if the dog had vanished. Ted was about to start asking the passers-by, but they seemed oblivious to the pet scurrying past. Eventually, after pacing back and forth along the park's paths in anxious silence, a flash of pink caught their eye in the distance. The dog was sitting near the fence, separating the park from the street. She appeared tired and out of breath, but otherwise unharmed. As Ted approached the dog, Berta suddenly darted between the bars of the fence. The woman cried out in dismay, but Ted's response was instantaneous. He sprinted towards the fence and, with a few long strides, hoisted himself over it, leaving the young woman in stunned silence. The dog, tired and unprepared for pursuit, was easy to catch. She was clearly exhausted from her lengthy romp through the park. Ted held his precious catch tightly in his hands, rushing towards the gate situated further down the street. Holding Bertha in his arms, he agonized over how to initiate a conversation with her temporary caretaker. What could he say to her? He didn't want to just let her go. He had been smitten at first sight, an experience he'd never encountered before. The thought that this might be the elusive love everyone spoke about flashed through his mind. But would this wonderful beauty want to communicate with him, a simple guy from a dysfunctional family? And if she would, wouldn't she throw him away and ridicule him if he dared to hint his feelings? "Here's your Bertha," Ted said, handing the cherished dog over to the young woman, who had obediently waited for him at the spot where they had parted. "Thank you so much. You've really saved me. You have no idea how much my friend loves this dog. She's like a family member to her," the woman said, taking the trembling pet and looping the surrounding leash in her slender, aristocratic palm. It took Ted a long time to pluck up the courage to say what he wanted to say. He felt that this captivating stranger was about to turn and disappear from his life forever, and he would be left alone, regretting the missed opportunity to express his feelings and reminiscing about the moments they shared, and he decided to speak. "My name is Ted," he announced, extending his hand. "Nice to meet you. I'm Alison. Thank you, Ted, from the bottom of my heart. What would I have done without you?" she replied, her grey eyes twinkling with mischief. "Oh, it's not the first time I've chased dogs," Ted quickly responded, regretting his choice of words as it might reveal his past as a dog walker. "Do you have a dog too?" she inquired, glancing up at him. He found it difficult to look away from her. Instead of confessing his lack of pets, Ted fabricated a story about walking his friend's dogs. "You must be a very kind man," Alison said, clutching Bertha. "Not everyone would care for the pets that aren't theirs." Ted laughed and delicately reminded the young woman that she was probably just like that too, running around with a leash and a dog instead of spending time in more suitable company. Actually, he wished to tell her that a beauty like her ought to be spending time with a beau, but he refrained from saying so. Now they were both engaged in casual conversation. Ted's dream had come true. He had met this girl and was beginning to get to know her. Alison conversed easily and openly, showing no discomfort in the presence of a stranger, despite the economic disparity between them. She was approachable, pleasant and honest, engaging in any discussion without bragging or rushing to leave. Ted was unsure if it was gratitude for the saved pet or simply Alison's personality. She revealed that she was in her 4th year of university, training to be an international lawyer. She found her studies enjoyable and straightforward. She nonchalantly mentioned her upcoming winter vacation at a ski resort with her family, as if it were as commonplace as a trip to the local bakery. To Ted, who had never ventured outside of the city, let alone overseas, her life seemed extraordinary. While Ted listened to Alison, he realised deep down that she wouldn't agree to meet him again. They were worlds apart. A single act of saving a dog wouldn't close the gap between their economic statuses. Ted shared little about himself. He mentioned his mother and an older brother who lived separately, and that he was self-employed, earning a living and paying rent. He didn't reveal his unemployment, hinting vaguely at the construction skills and various odd jobs. He aimed to keep Alison's attention for as long as he could. Alison and Ted strolled the park's end, where steps led up to the street. The young woman held Bertha, who was now calm and confident, closer in her arms, ready to bid farewell to Ted. "Thank you," Alison said sincerely. "You've been a great help. I don't know what I would have done without you. How could I have found Bertha? Good luck, Ted." However, Ted couldn't bear to part with her just yet. He didn't know what it would take to transform their accidental acquaintance into a romance, but he wanted to keep her in his sight. Summoning his courage, Ted suggested they meet again at their convenience to walk Bertha together. "What if she escapes and runs away again?" he added, immediately feeling foolish. If Alison had deciphered his intention to see her again, she didn't reveal it. She warmly agreed to Ted's suggestion, mentioning that she usually walks the dog after her studies, around 4:30 afternoon. They could meet the next day at the same place and time if he didn't change his mind. Alison bid goodbye to the young man and left the park with Bertha, leaving Ted alone and smiling foolishly after her. For their next meeting, Ted prepared meticulously. He hoped it would be a proper date. He critically reviewed his wardrobe, neatly groomed himself and spritzed on some inexpensive cologne from better times. He admired his reflection in the mirror. If he had more money, He would have bought flowers and taken Alison to a cafe, but his pockets were empty, and he wasn't sure how she would react to flowers from a man who had just walked her dog. What if Alison was merely mocking him and didn't plan on showing up? Doubts gnawed at Ted. He wondered if he should have asked for her phone number to ensure he wouldn't lose her. Yet he also thought he had made the right call, as she might have refused to give him her number. Had that happened, he wouldn't have had the anticipation of their meeting to look forward to. Alison arrived punctually, appearing even more beautiful to Ted than the previous day. She was dressed in a bright pink tracksuit, which made her look like a beautiful flower. Ted went out of his way to please and impress her. He shared anecdotes and stories from his life, even inventing and embellishing some, all to make her smile and laugh as they walked together. Inwardly, Ted hoped that the unpredictable Bertha would break free and run away. This would give him another chance to prove his usefulness to Alison. However, it seemed that Bertha, tired from the previous day's events, walked peacefully and quietly. The evening walk passed swiftly, and it was time for the young people to part ways. Ted knew this moment would come, but he hadn't anticipated it would arrive so quickly. It felt as if he had just met Alison in the park with Bertha on a leash, and now it was already time to say goodbye. "I haven't laughed this much in such a long time," Alison said earnestly, standing beside Ted. "Thank you for this wonderful evening. It's the best time I've had in ages." Ted struggled to find the right words to respond. If he let his emotions speak, he would have a list of compliments for Alison. He wanted to tell her how beautiful she was, how pleasant her company was, how intelligent she was, and how she made him feel like the happiest man in the world. But he held back, fearing he might scare her with his feelings. All he dared to do was invite her to meet him again at the same place and time the next day. "Well," Alison said seriously, "it seems Bertha is getting used to you. She doesn't run away, and I feel safer with you." So they started seeing each other regularly. Every day after her studies, Alison would leash her dog and go to the park, where Ted was waiting on them. To make it on time, Ted had to leave his part-time job early, earning less than he would have liked, but nothing could stop him. They enjoyed each other's company, and within 5 to 6 days these walks became a habit. But all good things must come to an end. The time of Alison's friend's stay at the country club had come to an end. She was to return the next day. So Ted, Alison and Bertha, on a leash, took their final stroll under the old linden trees along the park's main path. "It's strange to think I won't have to rush home from the university to walk the dog tomorrow," a young woman shared her thoughts. "Don't you want to get your own dog?" Ted asked without much hope. "No," the girl laughed. "With my lifestyle, I can't own a dog. I'd finish the semester and then go on vacation with my parents. I couldn't abandon a pet like that. And it's not feasible to bring a dog everywhere. So for now, I won't have any pets." Ted had so much he wanted to say. He was ready to care for her dog indefinitely, and she could trust him in any situation, not just with a pet. He even wanted to declare his love for her, but he valued this earnest girl with grey eyes too much to risk disclosing his feelings. Twilight had settled in as the young pair strolled along the lantern-lit alleys. It was time to head home, a path they both knew well. Suddenly, Ted, realizing that Alison might be leaving him for the last time, decided to ask for her phone number to keep in touch. He asked with such seriousness that she understood his intentions. For a few tense moments, she seemed lost in thought before promptly providing her number. Ted could barely express his gratitude before Alison waved goodbye and hurried home. From that moment, Ted's life was dominated by the anticipation of seeing Alison again, his dream girl. Countless times he held his phone, intending to call or text her, but he always hesitated. Setting the device aside, he wondered about their potential relationship, Who were they to each other? Could they be together if Alison wanted it? Or was it even worth trying? 3 days passed before he messaged her. His message was casual, simply asking how she was and what she was doing. To his surprise, Alison replied quickly, saying she was studying. So, they had started a lively correspondence. Later, Ted suggested to Alison that they meet in the park for a stroll, to which she agreed. That day, he was the happiest man in the world. Their meetings became regular, and although they didn't explicitly discuss love, they both enjoyed spending time together. Alison learned a lot about Ted, her faithful friend and conversationalist, and wasn't deterred by his financial situation. Ted, in turn, fell more in love with Alison each day as he uncovered the nuances of her character and behaviour. Ted realised they were growing attached to each other, which, given their circumstances, might not have been the best choice. However, he couldn't help his feelings. Every time he looked at Alison, his heart leapt, and the world around him seemed brighter and more beautiful. The time when Alison was supposed to go on vacation with her parents was approaching. The girl was finishing the last exams. There was only one left, when suddenly there was a significant accident. If not to say disaster. "I broke my leg!" cried Alison into the phone, calling Ted at an unusually late hour. Ted realised that, for the first time, Alison truly needed his help. So he promptly took matters into his own hands. 30 minutes after her call, he rescued himself from work and rushed to the emergency room, where Alison was taken directly from the university. As it turned out, Alison was walking to a teacher's counselling session, but did not notice a dangerous patch of ice, slipped on it and landed unluckily. She was given a plaster cast and advised to stay off her foot as much as possible. Going to the university was now out of the question. Alison had to figure out how to get home. She ordered a cab through an app, and Ted carried her to the car. It was clear to both of them that Alison couldn't get into the apartment without Ted's help, so the young woman invited him to come with her. Thus, Ted visited her home for the first time. The same evening, Ted met Alison's parents. They arrived from work as early as possible, excited by their daughter's call. Through Alison, Ted learned that her mother owns a beauty salon in the city centre, while her father leads a large firm. Ted was anxious about this meeting, fearing that Alison's parents might forbid him from seeing her. However, to his surprise, the meeting went smoothly. They didn't insult or offend him. Instead, they repeatedly thanked him for helping their daughter. Once the initial shock about Alison's injury subsided, her parents started discussing her studies. They were unsure whether she could attend the university exam the day after tomorrow, or if she would need to take sick leave and request a later exam date. This was a complicated issue until Ted stepped in. Without hesitation, he offered to assist Alison. He would leave work for a few hours each day to pick her up, take her to university, help her navigate around, and then take her home. His offer was accepted unanimously, and Alison's parents once again expressed their delight at what a good young man had appeared by their daughter's side. On that same evening, lying in bed, Ted realised his initial fear of meeting Alison's parents was unfounded. Despite being wealthy, they were humble and down to earth. He enjoyed his interaction with them, and this gave him the confidence to plan for his future. He wondered if it was time to confess his feelings to Alison. Seeing the positive response from Alison's parents, Ted felt more grounded and energised. He happily helped Alison commute to university, got her home after her exam, and then hurried off to work. His efforts did not go unnoticed, as Alison's parents invited him for Sunday dinner. Ted was anxious before the dinner, but the atmosphere was just as relaxed as his usual interactions with Alison. Everyone joked, laughed and shared interesting stories, with no one making fun of his modest clothing. Mrs. Smulders played a key role in creating this pleasant atmosphere. She showed genuine interest in Ted's work and family, and truly admired his accomplishments. Mr. Smulders spoke more about himself. He was a medium-build, self-confident and sturdy man, often casting an evaluating yet approving gaze at Ted. Alison later revealed that her father was an orphan, and thanks to his innate cunning and skilled hands, he managed to achieve much in life. He valued people with tenacity. Feeling confident, Ted began to speak more assertively about his future with Alison, planning as though they were already a devoted couple. Knowing her parents' positive opinion of him, Ted was no longer apprehensive. He believed he could accomplish great things. When Alison's parents went on ski vacation, they left their daughter in the city, since, because of the injury, skiing was out of the question for Alison for a long time. But they entrusted Ted with the responsibility of looking after Alison, and he diligently kept his promise, making sure Alison was never alone for long. Together, they watched movies, ate pizza delivered to their home, played board games, and dreamt. In short, they had as much fun as Alison's leg would permit. Toward the end of the first week without their parents, Ted and Alison engaged in a late-night, candid discussion about their interpretations of love. It was then that Ted confessed his feelings to Alison. For Ted it was a risky and difficult conversation. He did not know for sure how Alison would react to his revelation, because the girl may well have taken his attention for sincere friendship. But Alison only looked at Ted with her shining eyes and, without hesitation, confessed her reciprocal feelings. At that moment, Ted was the happiest man on the planet, knowing his love was returned. The young couple sat hugging each other under a plaid blanket until the evening, making plans and dreaming and dreaming. Their dreams were endless. Since that evening, Ted had literally started flying to date Alison like on wings, and the girl reciprocated him completely, reciprocating his feelings. Alison and Ted got married the following January. Initially, family life delighted Ted, especially since his father-in-law disapproved of Ted's low-profit, unpretentious job and offered him a chance to join the family business. Although Ted lacked the necessary knowledge, acumen and experience, his father-in-law believed these could be acquired. The key was to adapt quickly, make predictions, and remember vast amounts of information. Ted became the head of one of the company's subdivisions. As an inexperienced specialist, he was immediately supported by an advisor with significant experience in the field. This mentor guided him on decisions, and without him, Ted would have likely struggled in his first month. However, with the advisor's help, the subdivision performed better than ever. For the first time in his life, Ted was content with his salary and working conditions. He no longer had to rise at dawn, deal with dust and dirt, or spend half his day outside in any weather. He now worked in a spacious, clean and bright office, equipped with air conditioning and a coffee machine. He no longer worried about rent or what to have for dinner. His loving wife was always waiting for him at home. What else could Ted dream of? Living with Alison under one roof, in the apartment given to them by her parents, was a dream come true. The young couple spent a lot of time together after Alison returned from her studies and Ted from work. They always enjoyed each other's company and never grew bored. Alison was already pregnant by her last year of university. She and Ted didn't wait for her to start her career and gain work experience. Instead, they immediately began planning for the next generation of their family. Ted was eager to become a father and provide for his child what he lacked in his own childhood. Their first child was a girl. Ted did his best to show enthusiasm about being a father to a little princess. However, deep down he realized that he had hoped for a boy. The man wanted to raise a son who would remind him of himself, a worthy member of society. The daughter they had was very similar to her mother, with the same thoughtful grey eyes, smile, and charming dimples on her cheeks. In a word, Ted was happy and proud to have such a wife and daughter, but deep down he still felt something was missing. Life with a baby under the same roof was no longer the same. Alison was now mostly preoccupied with the child, leaving Ted feeling less involved. Ted, like many other young fathers, noted to himself that now he had more time to devote to the household, as well as to his young daughter, who grew up to be quite a screaming and active child. He sometimes started to stay late at work purposely. Although he finished his tasks, he would wait for Alison to bathe their daughter and put her to bed. Once he returned home, he used to tenderly kiss his usually sleeping daughter's forehead and hope for some alone time with his wife. However, Alison always had chores to do, unloading the washing machine, running the vacuum cleaner, or tidying up. When his wife asked him to help with these tasks, Ted rarely agreed. He believed that Alison, being on maternity leave, should handle the household chores, while he dealt with the exhaustion from his day filled with social interactions. Along with this, Ted appreciated that Alison never complained about him to his parents. Even though her parents might have condemned his behaviour, Alison remained silent. So Ted was grateful to his wife for her tolerance of his minor flaws and her discretion in keeping their disagreements private. Around the same time, Ted's mother reappeared and required his help. She had long given up on him and held no expectations, until her son told her that he had gotten married and that he and his young wife would live in the apartment of her parents. Ted's mother, a shrewd woman, quickly perceived the benefits of his match, given her daughter-in-law's parents' wealth. When she was invited to get acquainted with Alison, she immediately paid attention to the new car that Ted now used to drive, and the comfortable lifestyle he now enjoyed. Although she was glad to the birth of her granddaughter, her joy was somewhat insincere. Now she called Ted again and again to ask for money. Most of her pleas were not for herself, but for her eldest son, who had recently left the prison and was now a burden to her, incessantly drinking day and night. At first, Ted used to give money, even though with a heavy heart, but soon he realized that he just did not want to support his brother, who did not try to improve his own life in any way, but only wanted to take. The constant emotional pressure and his mother's manipulation did not contribute to his satisfaction with life. His daughter was growing up, and Ted increasingly found himself longing for a son. He couldn't always articulate how a baby daughter differed from a baby son in his mind, but he simply wanted a son. Ted had discussed this desire with Alison several times. However, his wife, who had undergone an emergency caesarean section during childbirth, repeatedly told Ted that it was not the right time to plan for a second child. Sometimes it seemed to Ted that he was literally going crazy at the thought of having a son, a successor of the family and a proud bearer of his surname. Envy filled him when he saw his friends with their sons, and even men on the street pushing strollers with boys. Yet Alison remained steadfast. Now, Ted seldom found the peace of sleep he used to enjoy when he first met and dated Alison. His responsibilities often kept him awake until late at night. Alison sometimes openly resented the little time he gave to her and their daughter, but the man always justified it by saying that he worked hard for the good of their family. For her part, Alison tried as carefully as possible to keep order in their apartment, to give the necessary attention to her husband, to raise their daughter, to cook exquisite dishes, and so on. The woman sincerely wanted her feelings with Ted to be as fresh and bright as when they had just met and liked each other, yet she could see the toll of their domestic life and his desire for a son was taking on Ted. This obsession of his discouraged both Alison and her parents, to whom the woman finally revealed a little about the problems in her family. Mr. Smulders couldn't understand why a daughter was less desirable than a son, and Alina advised their daughter not to dwell on this unjust bliss. Finally, Alison assertively promised to her husband that they would indeed aim to have a boy, but only after their older daughter had grown up. Ted, with a heavy heart, had to accept his wife's standpoint on this matter. He loved Alison and respected her as a reliable life partner, so he did not want to instigate an argument over this issue. Despite this, he yearned for a son. Their second pregnancy occurred 2 years after the first, unplanned, as the young couple had let their guard down. A month later, Alison revealed to her husband the 2 vivid stripes on the pregnancy test. Ted, filled with satisfaction, began to shower his wife with care and attention. He started spending more time on cooking and other household chores, even taking over some of Alison's responsibilities. He became involved in raising their daughter and eagerly anticipated the second ultrasound. Like a child on Christmas Eve, Ted dreamed of having a son and couldn't even imagine the idea of having another daughter. However, the second ultrasound made him nervous as the baby turned away from the machine and crossed its legs. Ted, having read on the internet that such behaviour is more common for boys, proudly boasted about it for weeks. That was until Alison went for another ultrasound, and the doctor revealed that they were having another daughter. Ted's disappointment was palpable. He seemed crestfallen, and even turned pale. Alison was torn. She felt it was wrong for Ted to be so affected by the fact that they would have a girl, yet she couldn't help but feel sorry for him. Meanwhile, Ted's significant emotional estrangement from his wife and daughter began with this unpleasant episode. Although everything seemed fine outwardly, Alison sensed that something was off. It was as if she did not meet the expectations of her husband to be able to give him a long-awaited son, and therefore she had to live with the feeling of her inferiority all the time. Ted was well aware that his high position and luxurious lifestyle were due to his wife and his in-laws. He didn't want his father-in-law to learn about his behaviour, so he maintained a respectful exterior. But he was simply discouraged by the thought that it was not known whether they would have a third child and whether he would be a boy. Ted was truly terrified that he would have to raise 2 girls and that he would not be able to realise himself as a full-fledged man. A phone call from his mother was the final straw. She informed him that his older brother's girlfriend was pregnant with a boy and asked his younger son to help with the money for a mortgage for the happy parents-to-be. For the first time in his life, Ted yelled at his mother and firmly dismissed her request. "Let him not count on help, not a penny here. That's all. If he could father a child, he should be able to provide for him." Ted ended the call abruptly and burst into tears like a young child. He couldn't comprehend why the thought of having a male heir was so consuming. He had everything: a beautiful wife, a healthy daughter, another child on the way, money, societal status, a home. Yet it wasn't enough. Ted yearned for a son, a desire as fervent as a toddler's insistence for a toy at the store. Ted realised he was dissatisfied with all he had achieved so far. Alison seemed less attractive. Running their business became monotonous, and his father-in-law's constant inquiries about the firm and his involvement in contracts through his confidants frustrated Ted further. The birth of their second healthy and beautiful daughter didn't exhilarate Ted too much. While his wife was in the hospital and their daughter was with her grandparents, Ted found solace in the arms of another woman. Now it seemed to him that Alison, as if on purpose mocking him, giving birth to 2 girls, and he, as a healthy young man, has every right to be happy. Ted made every effort to conceal his double life. He was always gentle with his wife, loving with his children, and diligent at work. However, under the guise of flimsy pretexts, he would disappear for a few hours into a nondescript hotel, emerging a different man. Occasionally he feared that someone, particularly his father-in-law, might discover his secret amusements. At those moments he would pause his escapades for a few days. He also knew Alison would not forgive him for his indiscretions, especially since she herself was a just so perfect wife and life partner. However, the urge to be more than just a son-in-law of a wealthy man always resurfaced, and he would find himself back at the same hotel. The children were growing up, but their father remained indifferent. Though he could smile broadly at the photo shoots his wife arranged for Christmas or their daughters' birthdays, the thought that he didn't have sons constantly lingered in the back of his mind. And then one day, Ted's assistant was hospitalized due to appendicitis, and the most qualified employee of another department was sent to replace her. Kristen was tall, young and slender, immediately capturing Ted's attention. He was so captivated that he lost himself in her presence. Despite her youth, Kristen was experienced and knowledgeable. She had recently turned 29 and had been a widow for 6 months after her husband died in a car accident. She was known as a competent employee who could handle any difficult situation. Ted found Kristen's characteristics highly appealing, both for his personal life and work. However, he was unsure how to approach this elegant woman who greeted him each morning with impeccably styled hair, a perfectly ironed suit, a warm smile and a cup of coffee. Ted would give half his remaining life just to ask Kristen one simple question. Would she be his? But alas, asking such a question and revealing himself meant losing his job and his family, if Kristen chose to report his claim. So Ted only continued to gaze longingly at his new secretary, not making any hasty actions. Alison had lost her mysterious and feminine allure in his eyes long ago. She moved around the house in nothing but a tracksuit, her hair not neatly arranged but twisted into a tight bun. This had grown increasingly annoying to Ted after the birth of their first daughter, but now it was a grand disaster. Besides, she was constantly busy with the children and could only talk about children, while Ted thought that he needed a worthy interlocutor with whom he could discuss not only diapers, porridge and development centres, which Alison took her daughters to. Kristen, on the other hand, was entirely different, flexible, seductive and enigmatic. She was the ideal he yearned for, someone he could lose himself in without a backward glance. Ted felt that for a joyful life he should have met Kristen earlier instead of Alison. The vibrant brunette Kristen, with her searing brown eyes, made Alison, a light and blonde woman, seem dull in comparison. Kristen drew attention wherever she went, making every man on the street turn to look at her, including Ted. He felt as if he was not his own anymore, his thoughts constantly consumed by the enchantress who was always around, yet always out of reach. An invisible wall seemed to stand between them, and it was a wall of fear. Ted was genuinely afraid that Kristen, being an experienced employee, would immediately report his intentions to his father-in-law. But even this fear could not stop Ted from thinking and desiring about Kristen. Her eyes were always in his mind, even during intimate moments with his wife. He felt completely obsessed and powerless against it. Every time Kristen brought him documents to sign, stood beside him, laughed or conversed in his presence, Ted lost control. Just 6 months ago, if someone had suggested that he could become so infatuated with a woman, he would have laughed in their face. But there was nothing funny about this current situation. Ted was completely in love. Kristen seemingly ignored his innuendos and the way her boss's breathing quickened when she entered his office. She was comfortable around everyone, him, his deputies and the rest of the staff. She was confident and easygoing with everybody, which irritated Ted. He found himself jealous of Kristen, despite her not being his and unaware of his feelings towards her. In addition to this, Kristen was intelligent and educated. Colleagues from other departments sought her advice, and she knew how to organize work efficiently and spot mistakes. She seemed content with her life, which Ted found appealing, compared to his often gloomy and dissatisfied wife, who complained that he didn't help with their daughters. Kristen dressed expensively and tastefully, wore good shoes, and, as Ted overheard, frequented high-end beauty salons. This certainly enhanced her appearance, making her glow and blossom. More than one person would turn their heads when she walked down the corridors, carrying folders full of papers. Ted spent 2 weeks in a state of obsession over Kristin, realizing that he couldn't continue like this. Her face appeared to him everywhere, and he even mistakenly called Alison by Kristin's name a few times. He had experienced infatuations before, but none had ever taken the form of obsessions. Ted decided he had to act. He was determined to win Kristin over, no matter the cost. After all, he saw risk-taking as a noble pursuit. Besides, his permanent secretary was going to return from sick leave soon, which would mean returning Kristin to her previous position. Ted feared he might run out of time to establish a relationship with her. Starting the conversation terrified Ted, but he knew it was necessary. He waited until they were alone in the office. On a Friday, when all other employees left early, he purposely stayed late. As a diligent secretary, Kristin couldn't leave until her boss did. She remained sitting at her workplace, organising the newly signed documents into folders. Ted invited Kristin to his office, and barely restraining his excitement, offered her to have coffee with him, just because they had been working together for 2 weeks and still hadn't gotten to know each other. Kristin's dark eyes sparked with a teasing expression, prompting Ted to quickly adopt a serious demeanour. However, in her presence, he felt himself melt like butter under a hot knife. After enjoying coffee, laced with a splash of fine brandy, they moved on to wine that Ted had saved for such an occasion, leading to candid conversations. Kristin was sitting across from him, her leg draped over the other, and Ted was convinced that she was wearing stockings, not the typical pantyhose his wife wore. It was a thought that drove him to distraction, making it difficult to focus on their conversation. Finally, unable to endure the tantalizing proximity without the possibility of growing closer, he gently covered Kristin's hand with his own. She lifted her eyes to meet his, and then quickly looked away. At that moment, Ted stopped all thought. He leaned in and kissed her, not in the way he kissed his wife, but rather swiftly, sharply, and instantly, as if his life depended on it. To Ted's surprise, Kristin didn't pull away. Instead, she sighed lightly and pressed herself against him, clinging to his torso like a weary traveller finding water in the desert. In the quiet of his study, Ted could only feel the pounding of his heart and hear his own blood rushing in his ears. When their lips finally parted and Kristin pulled away, seemingly regretting her momentary lapse, Ted pleaded, "Don't tell me it was a mistake and it won't happen again." "It was wonderful," Kristin whispered, sincerely with her dark, enticing eyes. "But you are married." A moan escaped from Ted, speaking more eloquently to Kristin than her words ever could. Once again he drew her close, buried his face in her hair, and relished the scent of her skin and the subtle curves of her wrists, neck, and shoulders. When Ted returned home, he was sullen and silent. He didn't want to interact with his children, who had become a mere source of irritation for him, or his wife. He didn't want to see anything or anyone around him, except for her, Kristin. Alison wanted to ask her husband a lot of difficult questions. For instance, why was he late? Would he go to the store? Could he take the youngest to the clinic instead of her, since she was going to a parent-teacher conference at their eldest daughter's school? He felt she was merely mocking him. What clinic? What meeting? When he was so consumed by his feelings for her. Ted quickly excused himself with a headache and retreated to the kitchen, where he began to reflect over a shot of whiskey. He understood perfectly well that Alison would not forgive his betrayal, and he would lose everything. His daughters, wife, and house. However, all that seemed insignificant to him. His mind was dominated by her, Kristin, charming and seductive. A powerful magnetism drew him towards her, a pull he did not want to resist. He thought about her every minute, dreamed about her, was inspired by her. He had never imagined that such powerful, compelling feelings could exist. The next day, Ted informed his wife that he would be visiting the new branch after work. He didn't fear lying about this because he knew he would indeed be visiting the new branch, though with Kristen. What he didn't tell his wife was that he had already found a nice apartment to rent nearby. Kristen was comfortable with how her relationship with her new boss was progressing. She occasionally asked him about the potential consequences if his wife discovered their affair. However, Ted avoided thinking about it. Instead, he focused on making Kristen feel special, often showering her with outfits, jewelry, and other lavish gifts. Despite his generosity, Ted was frustrated that Kristen wasn't entirely his. He fantasized about her becoming his wife, replacing his current, neglected spouse. However, Kristen refused to entertain this idea. She was clear that she was more interested in receiving gifts and enjoying their relationship, rather than dealing with domestic responsibilities. Ted was disheartened by this, but he hoped that with time Kristen would come to love him as much as he loved her, and eventually agree to marry him. Ted and Kristen no longer worked directly together, as Ted's permanent secretary had returned to her job. Ted regretted this situation, fearing that other men might attract Kristen. Whenever he voiced his concerns or accusations, Kristen would laugh them off, stating that Ted could not control her every move. The woman valued independence and money above all else, and she was not shy to share these beliefs with Ted. However, Ted chose to ignore them, thinking that Kristen was just protecting herself from loving him too much. Meanwhile, tension was escalating at home. Alison grew tired of her husband's indifference. He would often wander aimlessly around the house, paying little attention to her, their children, or household affairs. Perhaps it was a female instinct, or a sixth sense. But Alison sensed the reason for her husband's coldness. They were living almost separately, each in their own room. Alison was solely responsible for the children. In fact, Ted could not even name the school his older daughter attended or the kindergarten his younger child was in, as he had never visited either in all these years. Alison pondered for a long time, unable to make up her mind. At times she believed that everyone lived like this, and that there was no need to exacerbate the situation. Yet the thought of what their future held worried her. She was young. She had just turned 30, and she wondered how Ted would support and care for her and the children in the future, if even now he was behaving so disgustingly. Alison didn't share these thoughts with anyone, as she lacked a confidant. Discussing it with her parents was out of the question. Her father would be quick to retaliate against anyone who offended his daughter. So Alison had to make her own decision, and she did. She simply decided she had had enough of Ted and his half-hearted involvement in their family life. Alison didn't know how low Ted had fallen, or how low he would fall. She had no idea that her husband's muse was now another woman, so she thought that her decision would be met with the toughest possible resistance from Ted. Nevertheless, one day, she just gathered her husband's belongings and placed them in the stairwell. Returning from what appeared to be work, but was actually a rendezvous with his mistress, Ted was in for an unpleasant surprise. At first the man didn't know what to do. He considered begging Alison to take him back, confessing everything and changing for the sake of their children. But then he realized the situation might be for the best. Now, nothing would interfere with his happiness, and he could be with the woman he truly loved. Humming Mendelssohn's March in his head, Ted quickly took his suitcases and headed for the door, dialing Kristen's number on the way. He couldn't wait to tell her they would finally be together. However, despite Ted's joy, Kristen was not thrilled about their new reality. She merely took advantage of him as long as he had money for lavish gifts and costly cosmetic procedures. She was well aware of her role, a high-class predator and hunter of others' wealth, not a domesticated house cat burdened with household chores. She had no desire for children or live with Ted. While he dreamed naively, she used to indulge him, drawing him deeper into her web. However, now that his father-in-law, the actual head of the company, was likely to dismiss Ted or cut off his lucrative salary, he was no longer valuable to her. Nonetheless, she suspected he still had some resources left, and it made sense to stick around for a while. Kristen was right about Ted being out of the company in the near future. The news seemed to come as a surprise to Ted. He didn't seem to realize that everything he had been using freely was not his, nor did he consider the potential consequences of his actions. The day after Ted eagerly left for his new wife, he was denied entry to the office by the security service, and all his corporate cards were blocked. His luxury SUV, which he had used as a top manager of the company, was towed away. It seems the tow truck had been waiting nearby, and while Ted was arguing with the security guards inside the office, his vehicle was loaded onto the truck. By the time he ran out of the building, he could only watch as his car was towed away around the distant corner. The man didn't perceive it as the end of the world. After all, he had Kristen, and she had him. They would undoubtedly overcome whatever came their way. Ted, having topped up his card the previous day, called a cab to visit his lover. But at that time, Kristen was at work, so he had to wait for her outside her apartment, as she hadn't yet given him a key. When Kristen returned from work, she made a capricious face and wished to be right now in a fancy restaurant where they once liked to go. For the first time, Ted thought that his funds wouldn't last long at this rate, but he couldn't deny his beloved's simple request. After dinner they spent the evening lounging on the couch. Kristen flatly refused to discuss their future together until Ted comes up with a way to take money from tomorrow. This put Ted in a tough spot, and he spent a long time considering their options. He realized they had enough funds for a couple more weeks of this leisurely lifestyle. After that, he would need to find work or face financial hardship. But his father-in-law would not let him earn money in his social circle, it was clear. So only the former low-qualified options such as construction work were available to him. The realization of the predicament Kristen had put him in hit Ted hard, but Kristen seemed unconcerned. 2 more agonizing and turbulent days passed. Each morning, Kristen would unceremoniously kick Ted, her unfortunate lover, out of her apartment. This left him feeling humiliated, but he had nowhere else to go. In the evenings, she would remind him that since she was devoting time to him, he needed to reciprocate with gifts. As such, she acquired a rejuvenation treatment for her décolletage and a beautiful golden ring. When Ted confessed that he was out of money, Kristen simply smiled and reassured him. "The morning is wiser than the evening. We'll sort this out tomorrow." He only understood her meaning the next day when she told him she wasn't running a charity for the unemployed. With the words, "You can't afford a woman like me," she kicked him out, instructing him to leave her alone and not obstruct her search for a new, wealthy suitor. Feeling utterly defeated and hopeless, Ted rented a bed in a hostel and began to scrape by on odd jobs. Now the man deeply regretted his decision to be swayed by Kristen, but it was too late to turn back. His memories of Alison were now painted exclusively in a positive light, just as in the early days of their relationship. He no longer dwelled on her habit of wearing a tracksuit at home or choosing pantyhose over lace stockings. Instead, he remembered Alison's cooking skills, her care for their children, and her ability to tend to his needs without demanding more than he could provide. In short, now he finally noticed that she was the perfect wife. One sunny Sunday afternoon, A few months after their breakup, he went to the same park where they had first met. It felt like a lifetime ago. The park hadn't changed much, except for some different flowers in the flower beds. He didn't spot Alison at first. Instead, he noticed their youngest daughter cheerfully shouting at her older sister while skating from the slide. As Ted watched them, he couldn't help but marvel at their beauty, noticing how much they resembled their mother. Where is Alison? Why isn't she with the girls? Ted scanned the crowd for the solitary woman among those seated on nearby benches, but there was no Alison to be found. He was about to reproach her for her frivolity when he found himself short of breath. Sitting next to his Alison was a man, a stranger who appeared a couple of years older than him, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven and amiable. He was smiling warmly at Alison, his arm casually draped around her shoulders. He pointed at the girls and shared the smile. Then the unthinkable happened. Their youngest daughter ran up to this strange man, thrust a bouquet of dandelions into his hand, and he, judging by his expression, thanked her warmly and kissed her on the head. Ted was devastated. So, this was the kind of woman his wife was. She didn't even wait to grieve over her husband's leaving, whom she herself had ousted before moving on to another. Ted couldn't bear to watch Alison's newfound female bliss with this new man, or see how he doted on their children. He simply turned and walked away. The man found himself with nowhere to go and nothing to live for. His former life as a wealthy man named Ted was now a distant memory. Once respected and valued, he was now seen as worthless in the job market. Initially, he harboured immense anger towards Alison and his in-laws, blaming them for his predicament. Not a shred of doubt could penetrate his cynicism. However, after enduring 6 months of abject poverty and solitude, it began to dawn on him that he was the root cause of his own misfortune. Then one day on Alison's friends page, the one Ted was signed to, there was a photograph of Alison and another man, both beaming, staring back at him. The caption read, "Dear Alison and Andre, congratulations on your marriage. Happy years to you." Ted stared at it in disbelief, and at first he couldn't comprehend why the image seemed to wobble and blur. It was only when he tasted the saltiness of his tears that he understood everything. "I'm sick of all this, Bernie," Jay said, setting the empty beer glass on the table. His friend sighed and took a bite of the juicy rib. Then Bernie replied, "I told you right away Barbara wasn't that simple. What can you do? You're the young heir to the city's largest restaurant empire. No wonder you've got a whole crowd of beautiful women chasing after you." Jay smiled sadly. "Yes, that's what I'm used to. But when I met Barbara, it seemed to me that she was different." "No, Jay. She tried to be smarter than the others. She just pretended that she didn't care about your money. And then, when she realized you had fallen for her, she started demanding money." Jay sighed and began drawing patterns on the tablecloth with his fork. "I started paying for Barbara's apartment, her beautician, her trainer. It wasn't hard for me to buy her clothes, cosmetics, jewelry, take her to restaurants. It was nice to please her." Jay sighed again. The second glass of beer had already gone to his head, and he wanted to share his sadness with his best friend. "Did I ask for much in return?" he asked Bernie. "I just wanted her to love me and be honest with me, and what's worse, it's not the first time." Jay sighed. "I'm so tired of this. I can't seem to trust women any more." At that moment a waiter approached them. "Shall I bring another round?" he asked, taking away the empty glasses. "Yes, Joseph, please do," Jay answered. When the waiter brought the beer and left, Bernie smiled. "I love coming to your family's restaurant," he said. "The service is always top-notch." Jay grinned. "Yes, it has its advantages." Bernie suddenly glanced at Joseph, who had walked up to the counter and exchanged smiles with a petite blonde waitress. "Look at your waiter," said Bernie thoughtfully. Jay also looked at the couple. "I doubt that question crosses his mind," he replied. "What's your point?" "Maybe you should not tell girls who you really are when you meet them," Bernie suggested. The beer was taking its toll. "You mean I should pretend to be an ordinary guy?" Jay clarified. "Exactly. And then, when you're sure that the girl doesn't love you for your money, you tell her everything. Can you imagine what a pleasant surprise it will be for her?" Jay thought for a moment. "It sounds absurd. On the other hand, why not try it? But it's not as if I know how to do it. I've never been an ordinary guy. Any girl will figure me out right away." "Don't worry, we'll organize everything. For starters, you'll get a job as a waiter in one of our restaurants where no one knows you. Inexpensive clothes, shoes, phone, car. Make sure you take off your expensive watch." Jay laughed. "All right, you've talked me into it. It sounds fun. Even if it doesn't work out, we'll have fun. And you'll gain invaluable experience," Bernie added. The friends spent the next few days searching for the trappings of modest living. The enterprising Bernie got a list of stores from Roma. "Look how cheap everything is here," Jay said to his friend in surprise. "The quality leaves much to be desired, but I have enough for the first few months." "That's right, and these sneakers are nice," said Bernie, trying on a pair. "I'll take those." Jay laughed. "Actually, we're shopping for me," he said. "Enough browsing, let's go get a phone." They bought a used smartphone at the local market, then an old Corolla from an ad. "Not beat up or repainted?" asked Bernie with a businesslike grin, kicking the tyre for some reason. The seller, a sleep-deprived, unshaven, skinny young man, nodded sullenly. "Of course," he replied. "One owner, kept it like new. It'll run like a dream." Jay sighed and, lowering his voice, asked confidently, "Will it be able to drive at least for a couple of months?" The young man looked at him suspiciously but answered, 6 months for sure. Then I can't promise anything." Jay nodded. "We'll take it." After they had finished with the car, there was only the apartment left. At first, Jay didn't want to do it, but his friend convinced him. "You don't know how things will turn out," he said. "What if circumstances work out in such a way that you have to bring a girl to your apartment? Your penthouse in your neighbourhood certainly doesn't fit the story." The argument was valid. They chose a modest one-bedroom apartment in a residential neighbourhood. The next step was to get a job at one of the nearest restaurants. Jay, as the son of the owner, was known by sight, but when he drove his new car to a neighbourhood where he had never been seen before, no one recognised him. He was hired by a young female administrator, petite, with big blue eyes and blonde hair. She reminded Jay of a schoolgirl. "I wonder how old she is," he thought, "but since she works as an administrator, she must be a professional." His father was strict about that. "Have you worked as a waiter before?" asked the girl, whose name tag read Nancy. "I have," Jay replied. "A long time ago, though." He recalled a period in high school when he certainly felt the full weight of being the son of rich parents. He had entered that adolescent age when the authority of parents and teachers wanes, and you begin to feel that you and your peers are the smartest and coolest people in the world. Jay had gotten a little carried away then. His parents didn't limit his money. He took as much as he wanted. Teachers grew tired of calling and complaining about his behaviour and poor grades. Jay also started staying out late, or even overnight at his friends' houses. When his father noticed this, he called his son in for a serious talk. "I used to be in favour of you taking advantage of every opportunity our family's money could provide," he began. "Although your mum was against it, I thought I was teaching my only son self-reliance, responsibility, how to manage money, and most importantly, how to manage time, because it's the only truly valuable resource. But your mum was right. You weren't ready for such responsibility. I don't blame you. I was a teenager myself, but unlike you, I didn't have everything handed to me. I think it's time you learned what the real world is like. You're already 15, Jay, which means you can earn money yourself. But Dad, Jay objected, surprised. I don't want to work. His father sighed. You're right, but before we end this conversation, I'm informing you that from now on, you'll only use money you earn yourself. You still have your school meals, and we'll drive you there and back. But that's it. But Dad, my friends and I want to go out tomorrow. You can earn the money for that outing yourself. Get a good job at my restaurant as a waiter. They give good tips to those who work hard. Of course, Jay didn't want to work. His friends would have laughed at him, but Mr. Donaldson was as unapproachable as a rock. 2 weeks later, Jay asked his father to arrange a job at the restaurant. They took him without an interview, but on general terms. The owner personally instructed the manager to treat his son the same as the other waiters. At this restaurant, Jay went through a real school of life. The first 2 weeks were hard for him. He had to learn the menu, smile endlessly, and couldn't sit down for a second. He was reprimanded for every mistake because all staff in his father's restaurant had to work perfectly. He was so tired at work that he had no time for entertainment, and he still had to go to school. However, after a few months, Jay realized what his father wanted to achieve. He learned to appreciate money. He understood how ordinary people earned it. He began to value everything his family had. After that, Jay worked as a waiter until he graduated from high school, not continuously, but for a few months each year at his dad's restaurant. Of course, when he went to university, these part-time jobs had to be put on hold for a while. In the future, his father planned to hand over his entire restaurant chain to his son. But for now, that was still a long way off, and Jay used this time to gain experience and also to arrange his personal life. Anyway, I'm ready to learn quickly, Jay continued, and I'm a quick learner in general. Nancy nodded. It's none of my business, of course, but you don't look like someone applying for a waiter's job. Usually we have very young people coming in, most often students. Jay smiled. I'm only 25. I think you seem even younger. I'm 23. Jay was surprised. I didn't think it was possible to manage a restaurant like this at such a young age. I've been working at this restaurant since I was 17, the girl replied. I started as a cleaner, then a waitress, and a year ago I became a manager. You're doing an impressive job, Jay replied. I guess I should tell you a little about myself. Until recently I worked in an office. The company suddenly went bankrupt, and all the employees were let go. You might say, I need to pay rent, put gas in my car, and so on. Nancy seemed to ponder his words and nodded gravely. I like people who don't give up in difficult situations and seize every opportunity, she said. Jay, I'm hiring you. It felt like he was back in his youth. Practically nothing had changed in the restaurant as he went out into the dining area. Of course, he knew the menu practically by heart. Nancy was surprised when on his first day of training, he effortlessly told guests about the most complicated dishes and gave personal recommendations. You're the most talented waiter I've ever had, she confessed to Jay on the second day. After his first week, Jay went to a bar to meet his friend. So, asked Bernie, what's it like, the simple life? It reminds me of my college days, replied Jay, or even high school. My legs were buzzing for the first 3 days. That's about it. Sure, that's interesting, his friend rolled his eyes. But I'm asking about your success with the women. I'm sure plenty of people are checking out the handsome waiter. Jay chuckled. Bernie, it's only been a week. I haven't met many people yet. But you have many girls at work, his friend clarified. Well, I do. Waitresses, bartenders, customers. There are plenty I can chat with, but the only one I've liked so far is my boss." "Wow. Have you asked her out yet?" "No. Nancy made it clear from the start that she's against workplace relationships." "That's a shame." The friend leaned back on the couch and gave Jay a sly look. "I'm giving you an assignment for next week. You have to go on at least one date. Please keep in mind you didn't get a job here as a waiter. You're just playing the part of a simple guy to meet a simple girl." "Okay," Jay sighed. "I'll try." When Jay came to work the next day, the entire staff was upbeat. "Why is everyone so happy?" he asked Lisa. "Corporate Monday," the girl replied. "The day when all the staff stay after their shift and have a little party." "They still throw those?" thought Jay. Although Jay had worked in restaurants in the past, he had never attended such parties because he was underage. "May I ask you a question?" Lisa asked. She flirtatiously tossed her long red ponytail over her shoulder. "Sure," replied Jay, surprised. "Are you married?" That was unexpected. "No." "Do you have a girlfriend?" "Not either." "Lisa." "Jay," Nancy approached them. "The workday has already begun. You're chatting instead of attending to your duties." Lisa nodded, winked at Jay and turned towards the bar. She took a glass in one hand, a towel in the other, and began diligently pretending to work. Jay grabbed his clipboard, smiled guiltily at Nancy and went to a table. He suddenly realized he was pleased that Nancy had interrupted his conversation with Lisa. Did that mean she was jealous of him? That would be great. After Jay took the order, he allowed himself a glimpse of Nancy, but she was talking passionately on the phone. Judging by her serious face, the conversation was work-related, and she didn't even look at Jay. At last, the long and poorly attended Monday was over. When the doors were closed and locked behind the last guest, the red-headed Lisa slammed her towel against the counter with all her might. "Corporate Monday!" she shouted. Jay noticed that Nancy had joined in on this communal shouting as well. After that, everyone simultaneously started putting the restaurant in order and getting ready for the party. The calm, measured music for the guests was changed to something light and modern. Lisa, dancing, started mixing cocktails and pouring shots. The assistant cook was arranging plates with appetizers. Nancy was checking the day's reports. Jay approached her. "Is there anything I can do for you?" he asked Nancy. "You can," Lisa suddenly answered him. "Help me with the shots." Nancy didn't react to this, and Jay had no choice but to go help Lisa. In a few minutes they started having real fun, and Jay felt like a student again. At that moment he realized why his father had invented these corporate Mondays many years ago. Such parties united the team. He was only working here for the second week, and today he suddenly felt part of the team. Together they sang, joked, told stories, shared interesting work experiences, and, of course, drank. Nancy, although she was having fun with the rest of the group, seemed to be trying to stay away from him. The one who stayed closest to Jay was Lisa. "Do you like it here?" Lisa asked, filling another tray with shot glasses. "Yeah, it's great here." When Lisa finished, Jay deftly picked up the tray and carried it across the room. The happy employees applauded and quickly snatched up the shots. Jay returned to Lisa and placed the tray on the counter. "Good thing tomorrow's a day off," he said. She grinned. "Yeah, otherwise we wouldn't have survived." "How long have you worked here?" Jay asked, to keep the conversation going. He suddenly thought that Lisa was also a beautiful girl. Why was he so fixated on Nancy? She doesn't pay attention to him anyway. Moreover, she ignores him on purpose when he tries to approach her. And Bernie had reminded him correctly, he didn't work here as a waiter, but to meet nice girls. Why not go on a date with Lisa? She's pretty, funny, interesting, and she obviously likes him. "Almost a year," the girl answered his question. "I studied to be an economist, Graduated with honours." "Congratulations," replied Jay. "And then what?" "I gave my diploma to my parents and got a job here." "No regrets?" "No," Lisa said with a smile. "Shall we drink to that?" "Let's do it." After they clinked glasses and drank, Jay thought he caught Nancy's eye for a second, but when he turned around, the receptionist was already talking to the chef about something. "You know," Lisa said thoughtfully, "I have an absolutely amazing apricot liqueur at home." "Really?" Jay replied cautiously, still not entirely sure where she was going with this. "You should definitely try it," continued the bartender. "Are you inviting me over to your place sometime?" Jake clarified. "Why, sometime," Lisa chuckled. "We could do it tonight." "Okay, whatever you say." They finished well past midnight. Jay, as one of the few who remained steady on his feet, helped the others to get in cabs and clean up the restaurant. He noticed that Nancy had stayed behind as well. "Let me call you a cab," Jay suggested to her. "I haven't been drinking. I'll take my car, but only when I've closed the restaurant myself." "You're principled," Jay grinned. "Do you always do that?" "You seem to have forgotten your girlfriend," Nancy smirked. "The last time I saw her was in the restroom. Ask if she needs help, while I'm checking everything here." Jay nodded and walked towards the restroom. Carefully, he knocked on the door. No one answered. "Lisa?" Jay called out. "Lisa, is everything okay?" Only muffled sounds came back, which he recognized with difficulty as sobbing. He had to call Nancy for help. She sighed but went to assist. "Jay, she's completely drunk. You can't get anything intelligible out of her." After a moment, he heard her swear and call out to him. "Jay, help me!" In the restroom, Nancy tried to get Lisa to her feet, who was sobbing, smearing black mascara on her face, and refusing to stand. It was impossible to get anything intelligible out of her. With barely any effort, Nancy and Jay washed her up and dragged her into the staff room. "Okay, I'll help you get her to her house. You were going to spend the night, weren't you?" Nancy said sarcastically. Jay suddenly felt himself blushing like a boy. "Uh-huh, she invited me. Anyway, thanks, Nancy. They probably won't let her in a cab." They put Lisa in the back seat of Nancy's car, with Jay sitting next to her to keep an eye on her. Nancy sighed and started the car. They drove to Lisa's apartment in complete silence. Once there, Nancy reached into the bartender's purse and pulled out the keys to the apartment. "Take care of her," she commanded Jay, and went to open the entrance. He obediently took his inebriated colleague in his arms and followed Nancy. In the apartment, they tried again to bring Lisa to her senses, but to no avail. Suddenly, the girl began to sob. "I loved him," she blurted out. 3 years, and he—" Nancy sighed, once again wiped Lisa's face with a wet towel, and handed her a paper handkerchief, which the girl immediately used. "Her boyfriend dumped her 2 weeks ago," she explained to Jay. "That's why she's so upset. Put the kettle on." Jay didn't need to be told twice. He quickly rushed to the kitchen and then came back. Nancy was already stroking the girl's head and murmuring comforting words. Lisa responded incoherently, paying no attention to Jay. They stayed with her for almost 2 more hours, until Lisa regained her composure and calmed down a little. When she fell asleep, Nancy and Jay quickly left the apartment and closed the door behind them. "Let me give you a ride," Nancy suggested, "or you won't be able to get a cab at this hour." "But you'll get home later," he said. "Don't worry, I'm used to it." In the car, Jay decided to break the awkward silence. "I didn't realize that corporate Mondays were so eventful," he said. Nancy grinned. "This is still the light version. It's a good thing they're only once every 2 months. Otherwise, I'd go crazy." "I understand. I'm sorry." Nancy looked at him in surprise. For what? For Lisa. That you had to waste so much time on us. For this whole situation. It's not the first time this has happened with Lisa. She's a good bartender, but she's very sensitive. And she goes through a breakup like this once every month or 3. Jay grinned. That explains it. I thought she really liked me, but it turns out I was just supposed to be her shoulder to cry on. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I can't be responsible for Lisa. You'll talk to her the day after tomorrow and find out her true intentions. Maybe your sympathy for her will be mutual after all. I don't have any sympathy for her, Jay blurted out, then corrected himself. I mean, she's nice, of course, but I liked another girl in that restaurant. Despite the darkness in the car, he saw the administrator's cheeks turn pink. Who is she? You. Then why were you flirting with Lisa? She started it. I tried paying attention to you at first, but you were obviously about not liking me. I wasn't, Nancy started, but immediately cut herself short. We're here. She pulled up to his driveway, stopped the car, and suddenly yawned. Maybe you'll come to my place. Have some coffee? Jay asked. I'm worried about how you'll get home. Okay, Nancy nodded, rubbing her eyes vigorously. You have a nice apartment, she said, taking a seat on the couch. You should see my real apartment, Jay thought, but didn't say anything aloud. It'll be ready in 5 minutes, he said, and went into the kitchen. There was a good coffee maker standing there. Bernie had been against it, saying it was too expensive and suspicious, but Jay had insisted that he couldn't live without good coffee. When everything was ready, Jay returned to the room to call Nancy. She was already asleep, curled up. He gently covered her with a plaid and settled himself in the chair. He woke up because he felt his back stiffen. Opening his eyes, he saw that the couch was empty. Listening, he realized that there were sounds coming from the kitchen. Jay got up, rubbed his back, and went to investigate. Good morning, Nancy said. Breakfast will be ready soon. He rubbed his eyes. What did you make this out of? I went to the store. You have nothing at all. What do you eat? Mentally, Jay praised himself for taking out the trash before work yesterday. Otherwise, Nancy would have seen a pile of packages from ready-made meals and would definitely have wondered, how does a former office worker, now a waiter who's only been working for 2 weeks, afford expensive delicacies? I've been busy. I was planning to go shopping today, he said. On my day off, usually I eat at work. How much do I owe you? Nancy waved her hand dismissively. Nothing at all. I just made an omelette, oatmeal and coffee. They sat down to breakfast. Delicious, Jay replied. If you don't want to work as an administrator, you should become a cook. I'd be happy to give you recommendations. Nancy laughed. Thank you for such a generous offer. I'll keep that in mind. After breakfast, Nancy went home. Jay suggested she stay to watch a movie, or perhaps go for a walk, but she declined. We had a lovely breakfast, Nancy said, but I'm sorry I have things to do. See you tomorrow. The next day, Jay had to deal with 2 girls at once. He decided not to drag it out and started with Lisa. Hi, he said to her. How are you feeling? Hi, I'm fine. Do you expect me to apologize for my behavior? No, Jay replied. I just want to know how you're doing. I'm fine. I made up with my boyfriend yesterday. That's great. Good for you, Jay said. Well, shall I go? Yeah, Lisa replied indifferently and turned away to get something from the shelf. Jay wanted to go to Nancy, but saw that guests had already sat down at his table. Forcing a smile, he hurried over and was horrified to see his university buddies, Dennis and Anton, sitting there. Wow, Jay! Anton exclaimed in surprise. What are you doing here? Jay looked around. Fortunately, none of the staff was nearby. The neighbouring tables were empty. Hi, he said to his buddies. "Stop ruining my legend. I'm undercover here. No one on the staff can know who I really am. You're about to blow my cover with your shouting." The guys looked at each other, and then Dennis whistled delightedly. "Well, Mr. Donaldson outdid himself," he gasped. "He always comes up with something interesting. But to send his own son to work as a waiter, to check on the restaurant, that's something." "Quiet," Anton hissed. "Jay said no one must know." Dennis nodded and lowered his voice. "Jay, how's the food here? Is it okay?" Jay nodded. "Relax, everything's top-notch. What will you order? The usual?" Jay feared that his old pal's enthusiasm over this unexpected encounter might attract unwanted attention. Fortunately, none of the staff noticed anything suspicious. After Dennis and Anton had left, and he had served several more tables, Jay finally found a moment to approach Nancy. "Hi," Jay said. "How are you?" She smiled. "Good. Did you buy groceries? Or are you still hoping for our kitchen?" "I did. You can check it out for yourself." "Is this your way of inviting me over?" "That's bold, but please keep in mind I'm still your boss." "I haven't forgotten," Jay said. "We could just go for a walk first. The weather's nice." He suddenly realized he couldn't remember the last time he had asked a girl out on a simple date. Not to an expensive restaurant or some fancy outing like horseback riding or a hot air balloon ride. Just walking around the city. "That's a great idea," Nancy said suddenly. "I'd love to." The idea was indeed great. Jay had never thought it could be so enjoyable to just walk with a girl through the evening city and talk about everything under the sun. "Tell me about your family," he asked. "You're so mysterious and I don't know where to start." Nancy laughed. "I'm almost sorry to destroy this aura of mystery you've inexplicably surrounded me with, but I have to. So, I was born and raised in a small town, about an hour's bus ride from here. My mum's an elementary school teacher, and my dad's a storekeeper." "Oh, that's great," replied Jay. "I can see why you're so good at organizing people and keeping records. And also why you're so responsible." Nancy rolled her eyes instead of answering. "I'm the eldest daughter in the family," she continued. "My younger sister Anna will be in 11th grade this year, and my brother will be in 5th. "So you're from a large family?" She nodded. "And you?" "No, I'm an only child," he answered. "What do your mum and dad do?" Nancy asked. Jay had been preparing for this question. "My mum does housework, and my dad has his own little cafe, far away, almost outside the city." "Oh," Nancy laughed. "So, you're from a rich family?" Jay laughed. "I wouldn't say that. Just an ordinary one." "Just like me," she replied. "You said you've been working here since you were 16. How did that happen?" "My father fell seriously ill. We needed money fast, so I came to the city. Originally, I had planned to go to college, but I decided to get a job instead. At 17, nobody would hire me except here, where the previous administrator took pity on me and hired me as a cleaner. You know the rest of my career path." "And you never thought about going to college later?" Jay asked. Nancy smiled. "I think about it from time to time, but I can't afford it yet. My father has recovered now, and they don't need my help as much. Still, I know that as long as I work here, it'll be easier for my parents. Plus, my sister is starting university soon. She'll probably live with me." "Do you always think of others first?" he asked. "When do you think about yourself?" Nancy laughed. "Who says I don't think about myself? Firstly, I'm happy when my loved ones are happy. Secondly, I'm 23 and already the administrator of the largest restaurant chain in the city. Maybe I'll become a manager next. Is that so bad?" Jay grinned. "The prospect is tempting. But what if I'm still just a waiter by then? Would you still date me?" "Dating?" she interjected. We're just going out after work. But it's a date, Jay objected stubbornly. You're not going to argue with that, are you? Okay, Nancy sighed. Let it be a date. I'm sure it is, said Jay, and people go on dates to start dating. It's impossible to argue with you, she said. You're awfully stubborn. And that, he replied, is just the beginning of what you're learning about me. Although Nancy argued that it was too early to draw conclusions from one date, Jay was sure everything was going well. It was great to just walk around without worrying about making an impression, fretting over restaurant choices or flower bouquet sizes. Most importantly, he didn't have to worry whether the girl's feelings for him were sincere or if she was just waiting for the right moment to ask for money. With Nancy, everything felt real. At work, they tried not to show their feelings, but Jay felt the air between them was charged with invisible threads binding them together. Sometimes he even felt he could sense her gaze on his back. After the first date, they went on a second, then a third, then a fourth. When Nancy was preparing breakfast in Jay's apartment, he had bought groceries this time. He asked, So, can we consider ourselves dating now? Or are you still being stubborn? She laughed and playfully swatted him with a kitchen towel. Joker, Nancy muttered, feigning annoyance. Well, if it's so important to you, we can consider us dating. It is important to me, Jay said seriously, putting his arm around her waist and kissing her temple. Then he jokingly asked, So you'll still date me if you become a restaurant manager and I remain a simple waiter? Nancy sighed. Of course I will, silly, she replied. I don't care what job you have or where you work. Over the weekend he met up with Bernie. Lately, he and his best friend had hardly seen each other, only occasionally exchanging messages. This time, Jay himself called and suggested they meet up, like in the old days. His friend gladly agreed. Well, Bernie asked after they had hugged and sat at their usual table, it's been a while. You must have had good reasons for neglecting your best friend. Jay laughed. I'm sorry. It's wonderful to see you. And you're right, as always, there were reasons. You're in love. Bernie didn't even ask. He simply stated the fact. That's right, Jay replied. You're right again. Who is she? Your boss? Yes, her name is Nancy and she's astonishing. For the next hour, Jay told Bernie everything that had happened between him and Nancy over the last few months. I'm happy for you, Bernie replied. I don't want to rush things, but it seems you've really met the one this time. So, what's your next step? I'm going to propose to her, Jay answered without hesitation. Already? Aren't you moving a bit fast? No, I'm sure. Okay. I won't try to discourage you. So, how do you plan to do it? Rent the whole restaurant for only both of you? Whisk her away to the Maldives? Buy her thousands of roses? Jay smiled. Nothing like that. I'll buy a nice ring and propose to her in the kitchen of my apartment. Doesn't sound very romantic. Are you sure? Totally. And when are you going to reveal all your cards to her? I wouldn't play the game for long. I haven't decided yet. You're the one who came up with this whole disguise thing. So now, don't push me. I need time to find the right time. Okay, he sighed. Do as you please. I won't say another word. Your pancakes are the best, Jay said to Nancy later in the evening. Normal people eat them for breakfast, she replied, but you asked me to make them for dinner. I wanted something unusual because it's a special dinner tonight. And what's so special about it? Nancy asked. Jay slipped his hand into his pocket and in one deft movement quickly pulled something out and placed it on Nancy's ring finger. Will you be my wife? He asked. Nancy blinked in amazement. Aren't you moving too fast? She asked. No, Jay answered confidently. Maybe I'm being too impulsive and reckless, she said, but I'll accept. Really? Jay couldn't believe his luck. I remembered what you said about living for yourself sometimes, and I want to be your wife. Half an hour later, they had already started discussing a new topic. I should introduce you to my parents, Nancy said firmly. Sure, I'm all for it. She thought for a moment. In 3 days they both have the day off. I'll go home in the evening and prepare them. You can come the next morning. Okay, honey, whatever you say. Jay looked up directions in advance to the town where Nancy's parents lived. However, his plans were thwarted by his car, which flatly refused to start. Oh, come on, he sighed. That mechanic promised it would last 6 months. At first, he considered calling a cab or renting another car. Then he realized he wouldn't be able to explain such expenses to Nancy and her parents. Jay began to think of alternative ways to get there. He found a bus route that went to his destination. Jay had probably only taken the bus during his school days, so now he felt a bit anxious about boarding, buying a ticket, and finding the right seat. He sat down by the window and was about to put his headphones in when a woman's voice sounded nearby. I believe I'm sitting next to you. Jay turned and saw a tall, black-haired woman in her 40s, looking at him with a smile. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about her, except her eyes, large, black and deep. Her gaze seemed to scan Jay from head to toe. Did I take your seat? Jay asked. I'm sorry. I don't think I quite understood the ticket system. She smiled and shook her head, then sat down. Do you rarely take the bus? She asked. Yeah, Jay replied. I usually drive, but my car broke down at the worst time. Everything happens for a reason. Have you ever wondered how your life would have turned out, if not for a series of strange coincidences and spontaneous decisions? Perhaps in that case, you wouldn't be on this bus right now. You sound like a philosopher, Jay remarked. She laughed. No one's ever called me that before, but it sounds intriguing. You seem a little worried. Is it that obvious? Maybe not to the untrained eye, but I can see it. I can see why you're worried. Are you a psychic? He asked jokingly. You could say that, the woman replied. Okay, this conversation is getting interesting. Why am I worried? Because you're living someone else's life, pretending to be something you're not. You wanted to just play around, and now it's gone so far that you don't know how to get out of it. You found what you've been looking for through deception, and now you're afraid you're going to lose it when the truth comes out. Jay swallowed nervously. She's probably just a good psychologist, he tried to reassure himself. Or she said the first thing that came to her mind, and by some incredible coincidence guessed it. The woman seemed to read his thoughts and grinned. You can think of me however you want, she said. The reality of the situation won't change. Jay tried to smile, but his lips trembled. Since you know everything, he said, what advice do you have for me? How can I reveal the truth and keep what's precious? There's a price to pay for everything in this life, she said, and for deception too. The only thing I can advise you, don't drag it out, or it will be too late. The bus driver stopped suddenly, and the woman looked out the window. My stop, she said, and stood up. And I might add that every evil, deceit, and resentment in this world can only be resisted by one force. And what is that? Asked Jay. The power of love, replied the woman. And don't turn on your music or you'll miss your stop. You get off at the next one. She left the bus so quickly that Jay didn't have an opportunity to ask anything else. He pondered her words and, despite the warning, almost missed his stop. Meeting Nancy's parents went smoothly. Jay was pleased to see her large, friendly family. Nancy's sister Anna regarded him with undisguised curiosity, repeatedly asking how they met. Her younger brother eagerly pulled Jay into his room, offering to play computer games together. Nancy's mother was genuinely happy for her daughter, constantly offering the future son-in-law various snacks. The future father-in-law seemed unable to believe his older daughter had matured enough to marry and was endearingly concerned. In this warm, attentive environment, Jay found himself unable to reveal his true identity. He couldn't fathom their potential reactions, especially Nancy's. He knew her well enough to understand how much she valued sincerity and honesty. "They adore you," Nancy said as they drove back. "The first guy I've introduced to my parents, and it's already such a success." "Wow," Jay replied. "So I'm the first to be honoured?" "I wasn't really into relationships before," she smiled. "With you it just happened naturally." "I see. If I hadn't gotten work at the restaurant, I wouldn't have had a chance to meet you." "Perhaps." "Well, I'm glad that a chain of events led me to our restaurant that day." "I'm overjoyed too." The next day, Jay met Bernie. "Well, buddy, you're getting serious now," Bernie exhaled when Jay recounted everything. "You realize the next step is meeting your parents, right? Are you going to ask Mr. Donaldson and your mum to pretend to be simple pensioners?" "They certainly won't do that. I know it's time to tell the truth, but I can't figure out how." "By the way," Bernie added, "I've been meaning to ask, how does your father feel about you working as a waiter for several months?" "I haven't told him yet. I just said I'm studying the restaurant business from the inside," Jay replied. "He has no objection to that." "All right, you sly dog. Just make sure it's not too late," his friend warned. "You're not planning to pretend to be a waiter in front of Nancy forever, are you?" Jay smiled. "Why not? I'm happier now than I've ever been. I wasn't this content when I was the heir to a huge business. Now I live in a tiny one-room apartment, drive an old, constantly breaking down car, and earn in a month what I used to spend in one evening. Yet I'm dating the most beautiful girl in the world. That's what's important in life." "I'm truly happy for you, friend," Bernie said. "Just don't forget that Nancy isn't dating you, but a non-existent waiter." "I'll tell her," Jay vowed. "I will." Days passed, but he still couldn't bring himself to fulfill his promise. It always seemed the right moment never came. Sometimes work was busy, other times they'd start watching a romantic movie at home, and he didn't want to spoil the mood. Jay realized these were all excuses. He was simply afraid. He feared that honest, open, sincere Nancy wouldn't forgive such deception. The longer he procrastinated, the more guilt he felt. The words of that strange fortune-teller from the bus also lingered in his memory. She had warned him that it might be too late at some point. "Okay," Jay said to himself one morning. "I'll tell her everything today, after work." The day progressed as usual. Few visitors in the afternoon. A quiet and peaceful time when one could relax without rushing to serve everyone. Lost in thought, Jay approached the next table and nearly lost his ability to speak. There sat his father. "Well, hello, son." Mr. Donaldson greeted him coldly. "Hello, Dad," Jay replied, placing the menu in front of his guest. "I've been wondering where my heir has been spending his time these past months, not even visiting his parents. And then suddenly a strange rumour reaches me that he's working as a simple waiter in my own restaurant." "What are you doing here, Dad?" Jay asked. Instead of answering, Mr. Donaldson stopped Cindy, a waitress who was passing by. "Cindy, if you would be so kind," said the father, "please Get us an administrator." Cindy glanced fearfully at Jay, but immediately smiled professionally and replied, "Certainly, one moment." "What do you intend to do?" Jay asked, startled. "Nothing illegal," his father smiled. At that moment, Nancy approached their table. "Good afternoon, Mr. Donaldson," she greeted. "I'm glad to see you." "And I'm glad to see you, Nancy," he replied. "How are you doing here?" "Everything is fine and under control." "I'm glad. By the way, how do you like my son? Is he doing well?" Nancy blinked in confusion. "Your son?" Mr. Donaldson nodded at Jay. "My son, who has been working for you as a waiter for several months now, and as I recently learned, he has proposed to you, right?" Nancy froze in place. Jay didn't know what to do. "I'm sorry," he said. "I've been meaning to tell you for a long time, but I just couldn't find the right moment." He mumbled and saw tears welling up in the girl's eyes. "I beg your pardon, Mr. Donaldson," she murmured. "I must step aside for a moment." She almost ran out of the hall. The restaurant owner looked at his son. "Is there anything you want to tell me?" he asked. "What's there to tell?" Jay frowned. "You already know everything." "Yes, and I had to hear about it from you, my son. Not only have you been neglecting your duties for months, but you're marrying my restaurant employee." "Our restaurant, Dad," Jay said. "And why are you making such a big deal out of it? I'm doing what you've always wanted me to do, learning your business from the inside, from the bottom up. I'm building rapport with the team. And as for Nancy, that's my personal life. It doesn't concern you. And since we started this conversation, I'll finish. Nancy is the most amazing girl I've ever met. More than anything, I want to be with her. If I had to choose going back to my old life or staying with her and working as a simple waiter, I'd choose her in a heartbeat." Here, Mr. Donaldson reacted in a way that Jay didn't expect at all. He smiled. "I'm proud of you, son," the father said. "Perhaps I didn't always raise you right, and I wasn't always there when you needed me. Forgive me for that. Despite all my mistakes, you've grown up to be a wonderful person. I'm proud of you." He stood up and hugged his son. "Now, go after her," Mr. Donaldson said. "I've known Nancy for a long time. She really is a wonderful girl." Jay nodded and ran. He quickly realized where to look for her. Nancy was sitting in her car, gripping the steering wheel with both hands. He opened the passenger door and sat down next to her. "I'm sorry," he repeated. "I'm really sorry." Nancy sighed, but didn't say anything. Has that woman's prediction come true? He thought with horror. Am I too late? How could you even think of such a thing? She said angrily. Don't you realize how stupid that was? Jay smiled. I realize it now, but at the time when my friend and I came up with the idea, I thought it was awfully clever. I felt as if I'd gone on the most interesting adventure of my life. Ever since I was a child, I was just the son of rich parents. That was my main characteristic. Everything else, my personality, my looks, my accomplishments, always took a back seat. It's difficult to live like that when you see girls see your father's fortune first and then you. I wanted so much to be someone else. A simple guy who could be loved for his sense of humour and kindness, not for paying for apartments or designer shoes. I guess I can understand that, Nancy admitted. But you could have told me long ago. I introduced you to my whole family. I thought you were real. Nancy, Jay said, trying to put all his love into his words. I was real. My declarations of love, my kisses, my proposal. It was all real and came from the heart. It was I who proposed to you, not the son of a restaurant empire heir, not the waiter, but me, Jay. I should have told you long ago, he said. I know, but I was so scared, you have no idea. Every day, I felt like I was merging more and more with my new, made-up image. I think I started to forget who I was before because it was so great to be this new Jay. Working in a young, cool team, living in a cozy little apartment that I could clean with my own hands, and dating the most wonderful girl who was willing to be with me even if I stayed a waiter and she became the restaurant manager. Actually, I was going to promote you to administrator, she said, taking advantage of my position. Jay smiled. And now I can use my position of authority to promote you to manager. No, I want to earn that position honestly. Whatever you say, especially since my father is thrilled with you as it is. Really? Yes, I didn't know you two knew each other. Yes, Mr. Donaldson sometimes comes to our restaurant. Well, Jay summarized, you already know your future father-in-law, and my mum is a real sweetheart. You're going to love her. Actually, I haven't said I forgive you yet, she said. I have an excellent argument for it, Jay replied. Remember when we discussed our wedding? Of course. So, now we won't have to take a loan out for it, and you can buy yourself any dress you want. And you don't have to shorten the guest list anymore. Call everyone, even anyone you went to kindergarten with. Nancy laughed. Well, you're a sly one. These arguments are wonderful, but in fact, only one thing will make me agree. And what's that? You promise you'll never lie to me again, Nancy said. I promise, replied Jay solemnly, ready to seal the promise with a kiss. Nancy laughed. Accepted, she replied and reached for him. When they entered the restaurant, they found the entire staff had gathered and was waiting for them. Congratulations! Everyone shouted with glee, and several champagne corks popped. Nancy shrieked in surprise, clung to Jay, then looked at him with her huge blue eyes and laughed. And at that moment, he felt like the happiest man in the world. For Tess, the news of her divorce came like a thunderclap. She had lived with her husband Dylan for 12 years, and nothing had foreshadowed trouble. And then, now, he came in and said they were going their separate ways. What do you mean? Tess asked her husband in an uncertain voice. Tess, forgive me, but you and I are quite different people. You're not at all interested in what I do or with whom I spend my spare time. You're like a robot without emotion. You're interested only in the kitchen and cleaning. And then there are your dubious girlfriends. Why did you become friends with the neighbourhood grandmothers? You've been clucking with them all day long. You're 32, not 70. I'm sick of it. I've been thinking for a long time. Understand I didn't make this decision in a day, but I can't go on living with you. Stop, Tess interrupted, her voice rising. Are you not confused about anything now? What do you mean? I don't want to do anything. You yourself told me to quit a few years ago, literally gave me an ultimatum. You said your wife should take it easy and run the household. When I asked you to take a florist course, what did you say? Don't waste your time on nonsense. By the way, florist is a good profession. Again, what did you say? I make enough money so you don't have to think about money. How many times have we fought about this? And now it's my fault. You tied me to the house? I had to cut all ties with my old friends because you didn't like them. You want a divorce? Fine, divorce. But don't try to make me the scapegoat for everything now. Admit it. It's because of another woman, isn't it? There you go again with your jealousy. The husband's face reddened. I've told you the reasons. Isn't that enough? That's what I thought. Tess grinned bitterly. So the reason is a mistress. What makes you think that? Dylan said angrily. I understand that you're now trying to smooth things over as much as possible and show that I'm to blame for the breakup of the relationship. You always do that. Well, if our marriage is over now, just admit it. Dylan sighed. If it makes you feel better, yes, I've fallen in love with another woman. She gives me what you couldn't. You've completely neglected yourself. Do women nowadays always allow themselves to walk around at home in tracksuits with an incomprehensible ponytail on their head? Tell me, when was the last time you wore makeup or had a manicure? You can't even buy yourself a dress. I'm ashamed to take you out in public. I go to corporate parties alone with a living wife. What a shame. My boss always asks me, where's your wife? I'm sick of lying to him that you're sick or unwell. Nowadays, all women are taking care of themselves. They're shaking money off their husbands for those eyelashes and nails. But you've just given up on yourself, and therefore on me. Dylan, are you serious now? All right, let me go to the salons and stores all day long, and in the evenings to the gym, like the wives of your bosses. You'll be crying in a week about where the money goes and why the house isn't clean. How am I supposed to scrub the floors with these nails? These wives have cleaners and cooks. Can you afford such a thing? It's only in the movies that a housewife is a well-groomed woman with styling stilettos and a beautiful dress who sips champagne from morning until night. Or do you think the fact that it's just the two of us makes it easier for me? The windows overlook the avenue. At home there's dust, laundry, cleaning, cooking. You come home from work and see everything neat and tidy. And you want a delicious dinner. You can't do that in 5 minutes. When do you think I should go to the salons? What do salons have to do with it? You should at least buy yourself a nice suit, some lingerie. I want to see a beautiful wife beside me, not a tortured nag with a floor cloth in her hands. Tess was indignant. You don't give me enough money, even for the household, after all. Then recently, when I asked you to buy me a new down jacket, what did you say? Why so expensive? You walked to the store and back anyway. Your words. If I asked you for money for a beauty salon, what would you say? You're the one who made me stay at home and watch over the family hearth, and now you don't like that. Okay, maybe it was all wrong. But you understand, Tess, I wasn't looking for her on purpose. It just happened. Yes, you and I have lived together for many years. We've had all sorts of things, but recently you've become a stranger, and not just in appearance. I'm a human being. I can't get tenderness from you. I also need feeling and warmth, and the opportunity to develop. Who didn't give you this opportunity? The woman boiled up. I have never restricted you in anything at all. And now I see clearly there is also my fault that you drove me into this domestic trap. I shouldn't have listened to you. But anyway, now in gratitude for all these years together, you're just kicking me out now. Thank you, darling. You're leaving me in the lurch. Where do you expect me to go? You have a house. Dylan laughed. A house? Gasped Tess. Do you mean to say that I must now go to the village? And what will I do there? It's up to you to decide what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. You have no rights to this apartment. I bought it before our marriage. You inherited the house after your parents died. Your family nest. And I can't claim it either. You can start a farm, for example. I'll give you money for the first time. I'm not a monster. Are you out of your mind, Dylan? Tess covered her face with her hand. Farm? I don't even know how to run a farm like that. You were born out there. You must have some idea. Dylan grinned. Such a thing stays in the subconscious. You'll quickly get the hang of it. People live in villages and it's normal. Are you completely stupid? Tess didn't even have the strength to be angry. Tess, think and say what you want, but I've already decided everything and there's no turning back. I've given the documents to the lawyer. You don't even have to agree. We have no children, no common property, so they'll divorce quickly, and that's it. Go on a free voyage. Pack your things quietly now. I won't rush you. You have 1 week. I'll leave now so as not to bother you with my presence. Don't call me and beg me to come to my senses. Tell me, Dylan, who is this woman? Tess asked unexpectedly. Why do you need to know? Dylan replied after a moment's hesitation. I just want to understand who broke up my marriage. Probably some 20-year-old girl who lured you with her body and fresh face. No, her husband sighed. Just an ordinary woman. She's my age, even older than you, it turns out. She has a grown son. Tess, you understand, I'm serious. I love her. There are times when a man nears 40 and realizes he's been going the wrong way all his life. I'll be 40 in a year. I still want to be happy. We've been trying to build something for so many years, but didn't you realize and feel that something was going wrong? Yes, you can accuse me now of restricting you, but why didn't you oppose me once? Didn't insist on having your way? Because I loved you, Dylan. How could I argue with your decisions? That's what I mean. You're like modelling clay. Tess, why have you changed so much? When we met, you were like granite. It was impossible to impose your will. And then, what happened? Who would like his wife to walk around like a silent shadow and agree with everything? And besides, we lost our passion, Tess. Can you do without it? Dylan, what passion? How old are we? We have a strong household and trust. Or so I thought. Exactly. You thought. What's the use of a stable life if you can't bear to come home from work? Don't go on, Tess interrupted her husband, realizing she couldn't stand it any more and would cry. I'll pack my things and go to the village. I won't hold you back. After all, I have my pride. Tess lay helplessly on the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. The tears had already dried up. Several hours had passed since Dylan had left. How did this happen? The woman thought. Maybe Dylan is right. When it comes to divorce, you can't blame only one person. But I always tried to make everything good for us. I gave up everything for him. And now what's happening? No baby, no husband. Go, honey. Go to all 4 corners. I always thought that divorce was preceded by scandals, violent arguments, division of property, claims. But this is how it can be. Quiet and sudden. And he's perhaps right. I'm not sure if I feel deep love for him. Probably these tears are tears of self-pity, nothing more. Yes, it hurts, but it doesn't hurt to be alone. It hurts to realize that everything I've done in the past 10 years is worthless. To start from scratch? In the village? That's nonsense. I can't even grow a tomato. Of course I could learn, but I don't want to. Ever since I was a child, I've wanted to go to the city, to live a different life. I saw my mother and grandmother bending their backs in that damn vegetable garden. I'm grateful they didn't force me. But I couldn't just sit on the sidelines. And afterward I hated that garden with all my heart. Even the smell of the country house makes me sick. Since I left for the city, I've never even been there. Only when my mum died. What am I supposed to see there? Okay, I can try to sell the house, and at least have money for the first time here. But who needs a dilapidated hut in the middle of nowhere? No amount of gingerbread will lure people there. It'll take forever to sell. I don't have a penny. Yes, I could sell some things, jewellery, but that won't last long. Just a couple of months to scrape by. And who'd hire me? I have a 10-year gap in my career. I don't have much experience. If only I could learn to be a florist now and find a job I like. Why didn't I insist on it? Anyway, regretting won't help me. To the village, so be it. I'll get used to it. There's nature, a river, a forest. I could use Dad's plot of land for camping, set up houses, something like a campground. It's popular nowadays. In the summer, organise berry and mushroom tours. And in winter? It's too early to dream of such things. Everything needs money, advertising. Well, I'll have time to think about it. We need to get to the village first and then decide what to do and how to do it on the spot. With these thoughts, Tess fell asleep. Dylan's car kicked up dust and small pebbles as it made its way along a wide dirt road through a wheat field. Tess started frowning, her expression as gloomy as an autumn day. After passing a sign announcing the necessary village, the car turned off the highway onto a country road, leaving the sprouting field behind. In the distance, they saw the river with scattered houses along its banks. A small fishing farm and a sawmill kept the remaining handful of people here. Tess's parents' house was not even on the outskirts, but in a completely isolated area from other houses. Through the shriveled, time-blackened fence, sprawling raspberry bushes were visible, already dotted with berries. Tall lime trees lined the fence, emitting a faint, sweet fragrance that immediately triggered Tess's memories. She literally expected to hear a rooster shriek, her dog barking to announce their arrival, and her mother emerging from the creaking gate. But of course no one came out. The house greeted the couple with boarded-up windows. Dylan stopped the car. "Well, here we are," he sighed, turning off the ignition. Silently, Tess got out and slammed the door. She gazed sadly at the house she hadn't visited in years. Everything exuded loneliness and hopelessness. No dogs barked, no roosters crowed, no sounds of axes or human voices could be heard. Tess timidly opened the gate, shivering at its unpleasant creak, and stepped into the yard overgrown with wormwood. Tears welled up in her eyes at the sight of the empty dog kennel. She walked carefully to the shutters and gently stroked the peeling blue paint. "Well, that's it," Dylan's voice sounded behind her. Tess turned to see her husband, placing the wheeled suitcases in front of the wooden porch. "Like it?" he sneered. "Now you can build a nest for the chickens." "Not for me. I'm heading back, Tess. Got to be up early for work." "Yeah, for work," Tess snorted. "Go wherever you want." "I left you some money in the suitcase. Cash. It should be enough to start. Then you're on your own." "You needn't have bothered," the woman grinned bitterly. "You've thrown me away like trash. I don't need your handouts." "Tess, stop it. I can't leave you here to starve. I'll bring groceries this weekend. There's some in the bag. You won't starve. Call if you need anything. We're still officially married. I'm not abandoning you, but be careful." "Dylan, just go. I don't need any of this. I can manage on my own. I have arms, legs, and a head. Not the best, but they're there." Dylan silently left through the gate, and a minute later, Tess heard the engine start, and in 2 more, there was no trace of Dylan's visit. The woman took out her keys and opened the door. The smell of mould and years of accumulated dust assaulted her nose. Her mother had died 5 years ago. It was then that Tess had symbolically hung this lock and hired men to board up the windows, believing she'd never return here. Strange rustling sounds came from the ceiling. "Bats," Tess thought with a shudder. "I was always terrified of them. Dad used to deal with them, and now it seems I'll have to. Later, though. Now, I just want to assess the scale of this disaster. I can't even face the garden yet." In the dark kitchen, Tess fumbled for the light switch. It didn't work out. Groaning, she went to the electrical panel in the pantry. After some clicking, she finally got what she wanted, but a light bulb flashed briefly, then clicked and went out. Burned out. Tess returned to the kitchen. This time, the lamp was lit here, casting a dim glow over the shabby surroundings. In the corner stood a gas stove. Next to it, like a harsh monolith, stood an empty old refrigerator. The table was strewn with rags and newspapers. Tess couldn't recall leaving such items here. She stepped into the living room, the floorboards creaking beneath her feet. The furnishings were equally dismal and darkened. 2 sofas covered with faded, yet still colourful patchwork quilts were topped with a multitude of pillows. An old sideboard held sullen dishes and a single shelf of books. In the corner there was a TV set that had seen better days, its antenna horns protruding awkwardly. Suddenly there were two sharp sounds, from which startled Tess, causing her to jump and press her hands to her chest, as if to keep her heart from bursting out. The clock! She sighed with relief as the sound repeated. 2 o'clock, wow! Who'd have thought they were still ticking? How is that possible? Tess glanced at her phone screen. The electronic display showed only 7 minutes past 1. Aha, she laughed. Is that how you're greeting me? Did you recognize me, dear ones? Yes, your Tess is back, and now we'll stay together. Oh, you're so dusty and overgrown with cobwebs. Well then, I'll have to tidy up a bit. But first, I need a crowbar. Tess sighed heavily and headed to the barn, knowing where her father always kept his tools. She pulled back the latch on the small door and shone her flashlight inside. A crowbar gleamed in the corner. She grabbed it and went outside. The fresh air, warmed by the June sun and laden with humidity, immediately hit her nostrils, bringing the scent of freshly cut grass from the main settlement. Tess instantly felt the contrast with the stale air that had accumulated in the house. Clutching the crowbar tightly, she approached the windows. The first board from the boarded-up windows came off easily, showering her with splinters and dust. The others were more difficult, but Tess managed. However, the second window wouldn't budge at all. Damn you, she swore inwardly, dropping the crowbar in frustration. Hi! A voice suddenly called out from behind, making Tess shudder and turn around. What are you doing, looting? A tall man of about 45, dressed in a bright plaid shirt and jeans, stood near the gate. What makes you think that? She retorted, blowing a strand of sweat-dampened hair from her forehead. Well, what else am I supposed to think? The stranger grinned. You're standing here with a crowbar, breaking windows. Obviously trying to get in, aren't you? Yeah, and I suppose the open door doesn't explain everything to you at all, huh? Tess grimaced. By the way, shouldn't I be the one asking what you're doing on my property, barging in so easily? Oh, right. The man scratched the back of his head. Forgive me, I was just passing by and heard some noise. I thought someone might be breaking in. This place has been abandoned for a long time, and nobody comes around these parts. I assumed it was some hooligans trying to loot the place. So this is your house, then? It is, Tess nodded. Did you buy it or something? The stranger inquired. And did you come here with your family, or are you alone? You're too curious, Tess exclaimed. But no, I didn't buy it. I've returned to my ancestral home, so to speak, and I'm here alone, planning to restore the property. Wow, the man whistled. Do you think you can manage it? The house looks sturdy, but it's clearly been uninhabited for a while. I'm not sure a frail young lady could handle it on her own. Tess snorted. Whether I can manage or not, I'll have to. There's no other choice. I'll rebuild slowly. Where else can I go? I see, the man said, raising his hands in a conciliatory gesture. I'm Garrett, by the way. I live nearby. Would you like to come over for a visit? Tess, she replied, softening her tone. Thank you for the invitation, but I don't have time for visits. As you can see, I have a lot of work to do. Currently, I need to remove these boards because it's dark inside and there's an issue with the lighting. Let me help you then, Garrett offered. I'm sorry I didn't offer sooner. I was taken aback by your presence. What kind of man would I be if I didn't assist? Garrett swiftly approached Tess and picked up the crowbar from the ground. With a few practiced movements, he removed all the boards from the windows. Are there more? He asked, sniffing. Let me take them all off for you. It's not a small house, after all. I don't want to trouble a stranger who's going about his business. What business? Gareth laughed. I was just out for a walk, and to be honest, I came here with an ulterior motive. Here? You? Tess was surprised. Well, yes, Garrett said, embarrassed. A blush appeared on his stubbly cheeks, which Tess found quite endearing. It made the man look like a teenager caught in something embarrassing. Your garden is overgrown with raspberries. I only have a gazebo and a barbecue at my place, so I come here to sneak raspberries. The berries are just ripe now. I've just arrived and came straight here. I confess I've been doing this for years. Your gate was unlocked, so I let myself in. The first time was an accident. I've always been drawn to abandoned houses like this. I wouldn't go inside. I can see the lock and the shutters are boarded up, so it's not worth it. Some people just abandon their houses, so I explore. It can be fascinating, you know, to look at an abandoned home that was once someone's cosy haven. You can't imagine what you can find sometimes, especially photographs, old clocks, household items, kitchen utensils. I'm genuinely interested in all this. I hope I don't seem strange to you. You don't live here, but only visit? Tess looked at the man carefully. Yes, I allow myself to come for a month once a year. I'm from the city, where the work is stressful, and I'm tired of all these resorts. I had a hard time with my ex-wife. She's the one who wanted expensive vacations. I'm a simple guy, drawn to nature. My great-grandfather lived in this village. My grandfather was born here. I visited as a child, but rarely. Then, growing up, you know, I wanted to buy a plot of land, and I noticed that there was land selling in this village. Well, I quickly got ready, bought the builders, and they quickly made a house for me. I wanted a log cabin like my grandfather had. That hut has been gone for 30 years. It burned down. But I built mine, of course, using more modern technologies. Come and visit me. I'll show you everything. But Tess tried to remind him again about her pile of things to do. I remember. But Tess, work isn't a wolf. It won't run away into the forest. You can't plant the garden this year anyway, and it's better to clear everything in the fall. If you need, I can help you with equipment. You can't uproot it all by yourself. But it's a pity about the raspberries. You have delicious berries here. If I were you, I'd pick more and make jam. As for the house, you can't fix it in a couple of days anyway. You need rest too. I just arrived yesterday. I don't have much work to do, but I can help you if you'll accept my offer. And don't think you'll inconvenience me. I like to work with my hands. I work with my head all day long in the office, signing papers. It's maddening. And in my own house, there's nothing to do. All I do all day is chop wood and heat the sauna. Do you live alone? It's my little secret passion. Last year and the year before, we came with my daughter, but she didn't like it. What do you expect? She's 21-year-old, and like her mother, she wants to go to resorts. Although now she's more focused on her studies, but she won't come here on vacation with me anymore. So I'm here alone, and I'm bored. Well, not really alone. Not really? Tess asked. I'm here with Russell. He's my friend, confidant, whatever you want to call it. I have no one dearer to me than him now. However, today he took offence and flatly refused to go with me to eat raspberries. I guess he felt he'd have to embarrass himself in front of the mistress of this house. I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. Who's Russell? That's my dog. Garrett laughed. He's really cool. A Shiba Inu breed. You know them, maybe? Tess nodded happily. I know. I've been asking my husband for years to get one. Our neighbours are breeders. Oh, so you're married? Garrett asked, embarrassed. Tess stammered. Yes and no. What do you mean? Divorced. That's why I came here. My husband kicked me out and brought me here himself. Why did he do that? The man's eyes widened. Have you offended him so much? It would take me a long time to tell you all this, and why should you care? To put it simply, we didn't see eye to eye. That's after 12 years of marriage. We have no children. I let myself be only a housewife, stopped being attractive, and he found a more successful and beautiful woman. That's the whole story. It can't be like that. Garrett looked at Tess closely. I don't see that you stopped being attractive. You're a charming woman. Yes, you look a little tired, but that's all fixable. The air here will do you good. You won't recognise yourself tomorrow." "Don't flatter me, Garrett." Tess waved away languidly, blushing like a garden raspberry. "Better the bitter truth than a sweet lie." And I never lie to Tess. Honestly, I even got divorced because of it. My wife got tired of listening to the truth and ran away from me, taking half of our joint property. She left me a daughter, though, thank God, already grown up. Is that so? So we're kind of unfortunate companions. What's unfortunate? I think it's quite the opposite. Is it happiness to live with a person for whom you no longer mean anything? As far as I'm concerned, divorce is a ticket to a new, happy life. When I got divorced, I even breathed more freely and found time for my interests. I got a dog. My wife didn't agree with that either. She said the house would be dirty and I wouldn't be able to travel anywhere. Ironically, she made 1,000 times more mess. Our housekeeper hardly had time to clean up after her. At least our daughter Piper wasn't like that. She's a perfectionist. She can't stand dust and mess. It makes the village a living hell for her. By the way, don't you have children? No, sighed Tess. I wanted to, but my husband didn't. Then somehow we stopped talking about it altogether. And now it's strange to talk about it at all. I haven't got a husband, have I? Well, let's change the subject. Let's. Tess, maybe I'll help you with something else now, and you can feed me raspberries later, so I don't leave empty-handed. There's nothing to help with. At least I'll get your things into the house. It's not a small bag, you can't carry it yourself. Women shouldn't lift heavy things. Tess looked at the man sceptically. I should clean up the place first. There's a metre-long layer of dust in the house. It's too early to drag things in. Let me get you some water to mop the floors then. Come on, I'll get buckets. The well is over there. For several hours, Tess and Garrett cleaned the house, trying to make it look lived in. By evening, they succeeded. Tired but satisfied with their work, they sat down on the veranda. Tess, I'm going home now because Russell is probably going crazy without me. I'll come over tomorrow and see what needs fixing. I've got some tools. There's even something left in the shed from the construction days. Some plywood and paint, so you don't have to go shopping. Oh, that's great. I'd appreciate it. And thank you for all your help. You're welcome. Well, I'm off then. Call me if you need anything. Wait, what about the raspberries? Oh, that's right, I forgot. Tess quickly filled the big bowl with ripe berries. She handed it to Garrett and they said goodbye. It got dark quickly. Tess lay on her grandmother's bed. For some reason, she couldn't lie on her mother's bed, and her own bed was in a cluttered room in the part of the house she hadn't gotten to yet. The clock, which Tess had managed to run, struck 11. To this beat, the woman fell asleep. For the second week, Tess settled into her new home. Garrett came every day and helped restore the house. He brought with him a cheerful dog, who at the sight of Tess lost his head, fell on his back offering his white belly, and wagged his tail desperately. He liked Tess. Surprisingly, Garrett noted when the woman once again stroked Russell, sprawled in the middle of the yard. It's the first time I've seen him let a woman near him. Even Piper he doesn't love, and he won't let our housekeeper within 2 meters. When we walk, he only goes to dogs with male owners. I often have ladies who want to get acquainted with me, and he growls at them. To tell you the truth, I always thought Russell was a misogynist. But he liked you right away. It's mutual, Tess laughed. I love dogs so much. We used to have Bucky, a white husky. She died many years ago, but I still remember her. I persuaded Dylan to get a dog, but he flatly refused. I wish I wasn't bored at home alone. Also, my neighbours are breeders of the Shiba Inu breed. Their kennel is called Destiny Gift. You've probably heard of them since you're into the breed. Destiny Gift? Garrett was surprised. Well, here's a coincidence. Russell was their puppy. A subordinate of mine recommended this kennel. No way! Yes, Dylan was having an affair with the owner. He even managed to talk her into a discount. They wanted to sell Russell abroad, but when I saw him, or rather he saw me, We both realised we couldn't live without each other. Who's Dylan? A subordinate of mine, my commercial director to be precise. I've been talking about getting a pet for a long time, so he told me one day, my neighbour breeds great dogs, and led me to this kennel. That's weird. Weird? What? That I wanted to get a dog for myself? No, Tess frowned. The whole thing about Dylan is strange. It's just that my husband's name is Dylan too, and the owner of the Destiny gift lives in the next doorway, and my husband works as a commercial director in the Growth Lab. Wait, Garrett interrupted her. Growth Lab is my company. And your surname name isn't Pointer by any chance? Pointer. Tess turned pale. So you're Dylan's wife? Garrett's eyes bulged. Yes. Awkward. Wait, I mean he... It looks like he cheated on me with that dog lady. I couldn't even think about her. We used to talk so nicely all the time. Dylan, what a scoundrel. Tess, stop it. Cut him out of your life already. I don't care who he cheated on you with. You're not together anymore. What's the point of being angry and jealous now? I guess you're right, Tess thought to herself. To hell with both of them. Let them do what they want. It doesn't concern me anymore. Tess, tell me something else. Dylan never even brought you to corporate parties. I know all the employees' wives and husbands, while he said every time that his wife wasn't feeling well. We thought he was torturing you there, or you were bedridden, and he was embarrassed to admit it. Didn't you want to meet his co-workers? Or don't you like these kind of events? He didn't invite me, and then he told me he was ashamed to take me out in public because I wasn't fashionable and stunning enough. Is he completely crazy? Oh, Tess, you got off that ship just in time. Dylan always seemed like a sensible man to me. I never thought he'd treat his wife like that. With his colleagues from work, he was always so gallant, courteous. The girls from the accounting department make eyes at him. He's always adamant, but in reality, it turns out to be... Well, I'll give it to him. Garrett, don't. Why mix work and private life? So after 12 years of marriage, he just threw you out on the street. And you say, leave him alone? Let him realise that he can be kicked out too. Then he'll try to find a decent job. Garrett. Tess looked at him seriously. How is Dylan at work? For 8 years, he's had no complaints at all. Well, let him work. Why spoil his life? He's already punished himself, and God sees everything. I don't want to interfere in his life. Revenge is for the weak and unstable. In my opinion, it's wise to show him that I can be happy without his involvement. There, that's right. A woman like you is worth everything. Dylan is such an ass. I'm really amazed. Such a smart man. But in terms of personal life, he's a complete ignoramus. Let's not talk about him. Tess patted Garrett on the shoulder. Garrett, listen, we've done everything today. Maybe we'll go to the river? I haven't even had a swim since I arrived. There was this interesting place here. I used to go there as a kid. It was like a green gazebo with a green river flowing under a green canopy. The water's always warm and shallow, but I recently went to the spring and saw that there are houses built right along the shore. I'm afraid they've ruined the place. Well, look at this picture. Garrett rummaged through his phone. Is this the place? That's exactly it. Yes, it's changed a bit, but there's no doubt it's there. Did you really find it? And it's still there. It's wonderful. Come, let's go for a walk to your place, and at the same time, you'll come to visit me. Garrett winked, and Russell, as if sensing that his master was up to something, barked encouragingly. They walked along the winding path leading from Tess's house to the riverbank. The path went steeply downhill, and they had to cling to the tall grass to somehow hold on and not fall. Garrett laughed at the urgent barking of Russell, whose tail flickered in the grass. A very secluded place, I can't deny. It's not my fault, Tess excused herself. I haven't walked here for 20 years. It used to be more civilized. There used to be wooden railings and steps cut directly into the ground. Now it's all overgrown. And what's this? Tess's gaze, which had already managed to go downstairs, where the path smoothly rolled into a cobblestone paved area, stopped on a fence, almost completely hidden by dense foliage. Garrett, there is a fence here, she said with disappointment in her voice. Garrett wrinkled his nose. Let's climb over? What are you doing? This is private property. Somebody must have bought this plot and fenced it off. How did you get there? Did you climb over? You look like a decent man. No, there's a gate nearby. You can get in through it. Though I usually go on the other way. Am I right, Russell? The dog barked happily. Garrett, we can't do this. Even if no one's here, we're trespassing. What if the owners see us? This is embarrassing. Adults with a dog splashing in the river on someone's property. Tess, why so serious? Don't you have any sense of adventure? I'm telling you, no one's there. Even if there is, I'll take full responsibility. Don't worry. We've come this far, so let's just look around. If you don't like it, we'll leave and go straight to my place. All right, Tess reluctantly agreed, scanning the coastal bushes as if searching for an armed guard. Didn't you say there was a gate here? Yes, over there, look. Garrett disappeared into the vegetation. Tess quickly followed. It's locked, she muttered unhappily. Garrett, that's a sign. Let's go back. No, we've come too far to turn back now, and we'll be going around this fenced area until night. That's it. We're going over the fence. Without waiting for Tess's reply, the man deftly climbed to the lattice and jumped to the ground on the other side. Tess looked at him, confused. I don't know how to do that. Oh, come on. You grew up in the countryside, and you don't know how to climb fences? Yes, but what about Russell? Russell? Oh, he's already ahead of us. Unlike you, he's already swimming. Come on. Why are you hesitating? When I think of you breaking off boards from your windows, I wonder if you've been switched with someone else. I never thought you were such a coward. Tess realised Garrett was deliberately provoking her, but her pride had already taken over. She resolutely put her foot on the gate and grabbed the top edge of it. In 5 seconds, she was standing next to Garrett, brushing sticky leaves off her skirt. That's more like it. The man patted her shoulder. Because you were standing like a shy first grader. Well, shall we go swim? They followed the narrow, stone-paved path deep into the thicket, and soon the dark but clear water appeared before their eyes. Dragonflies fluttered over tall grass along the shore, grasshoppers chirped nearby, and birds sang in the willow branches, arching over the water. It's wonderful here, Tess whispered. Look, the bridge is newly built, and you can see the place is well maintained. Everything was different in my childhood, but this is definitely my favourite place. Why are you whispering? Garrett laughed loudly. Shush! Tess looked at him pleadingly. Someone might hear us. Look, there's a boat. Clearly people use this place now. Oh my God, look, Russell's over there. Hearing his name, the dog barked loudly. Tess turned pale. From somewhere came a noise. Someone was coming down to them. Quick, into the bushes! Tess squeaked and was about to dive for cover, but Garrett grabbed her and held her tight. Who's there? Came a hoarse male voice. Oh, Russell, is that you? An old man emerged from the thicket, and the dog immediately ran to him, wagging its tail and bouncing playfully. Mr. Rhines, Garrett called out. It's me, don't be alarmed. Oh, Garrett, is that you? I heard barking and thought a stray had got in. Why didn't you come through the front door? How did you slip past me? I hope you didn't swim across from the other shore. It's very dangerous. Tess stood bewildered, looking from Garrett to the old man. Oh, I see you're not alone. Then I won't bother you, Mr. Rhines said, and left, taking the cheerful Russell with him. Will you explain what's going on? Tess looked at Garrett suspiciously. What's to explain? The man smiled, releasing Tess from his embrace. "That's my caretaker, Mr. Rhines. My grandfather's old comrade in arms. When he learned I was building a house here, he asked to look after it in my absence. He lives here in the guest house. He's a fascinating old fellow, a veteran, a retired colonel or something. I'm not sure about the exact terminology." "That's not what I mean, What then?" "Well, this property is mine. My house is up there. I bought this plot because of this spot on the river. I fell in love with it at first sight. Yes, it was overgrown. And by the way, you weren't the only one who swam here as a child. I discovered it before you did. We cleared it all out and fenced it off to keep intruders out, mainly stray dogs. And so—" "Why didn't you tell me right away?" Tess tapped him lightly on the chest with her fist. "Was it pleasant to mock me? To watch me shake with fear?" "Tess, don't be angry. I decided to play a trick on you. Let's go for a swim. The water is wonderful." "All right, I'll do it." Tess threw off her sundress, under which she had earlier put on a swimsuit, and barefoot walked along the bridge. Cautiously testing the water with her foot, she jumped into the river and enthusiastically shouted. The water pleasantly cooled her sun-heated skin. Such bliss the woman hadn't experienced in a long time. All her problems immediately evaporated. Dylan, with his cheating and divorce, her regret about wasted years, and the old house cracking at all seams, all forgotten. There was only her and the river flowing leisurely in its corridor of trees. Garrett caught up with her quickly. With a light breaststroke, he was splashing through the clear water. They frolicked for a long time, laughing with immense happiness. The man now and then doused her with a fountain of splashes, and then, to Tess's great surprise, tightly pressed her to himself and kissed her. Really, with such passion and tenderness that Tess felt dizzy. Everything around mixed in a whirlpool of splashes, drops, and sun bunnies skipping through the dense foliage, accompanied by birdsong. Tess was lying on the soft cushions that covered the wide sofa of the gazebo, pressing her head against Garrett's shoulder. Nearby, a cricket chirped. Wood crackled in the brazier, casting fairy-tale glints and shadows on the ivy-coloured gazebo. "Tess," the man said, kissing her forehead, "I'm leaving tomorrow. Business can't wait. It's been a month. I didn't realise it would be so soon." "Okay," Tess replied with a deep sigh. Her heart was pounding desperately. She had spent a whole month in the company of this wonderful, kind and soulful man. Now she realised that he was leaving her alone, taking away those joyful hours he had given her. She would be left alone with an old house, an overgrown vegetable garden, and in complete confusion about where to go next. "Why are you so serious and upset?" Gareth playfully inquired. "No reason." "No, come on, tell me." "There's nothing to tell," the woman dismissed, lifting herself up. That was it. The fairy tale is over. Cinderella is left alone with her pumpkin, and the prince has gone away on his white horse. "You have no pumpkin," laughed Garrett. "Only raspberries in your garden, though they are delicious. And the prince's horse is not white, but black." "Garrett, stop it. You know exactly what I mean." "No, I don't." "Confess. Come on, Cinderella." "Garrett, we've only known each other a month, and it was so good that I let myself relax and dream up many things. But now you're leaving and coming back next year, and I'll be here alone. And instead of crystal shoes, I'll have felt boots in winter and galoshes in summer." "Then don't stay here. I can see that country life is not your thing. It's one thing to eat raspberries and swim, and another to live here. No, I don't doubt you at all. You have enough zeal and energy to raise the whole village. But even though you were born in the village, you were made for something else. What do you dream of?" "Me?" Tess looked at him confused. "What I dream of, I know," laughed the man. "Yes, I'd like to know about your dream." "I don't have any dream," Tess sighed gloomily. "I used to think that I dreamed of a strong family, 2 or 3 children, But now I don't even have one. And my husband left. My dream fell apart. Now you're here, but I realise it's not serious. I used to dream of being a florist. I liked the way they make compositions, matching flowers to one another, creating real masterpieces. But Dylan suppressed all this at the root, said that it's a whim, a hobby for schoolgirls. Would you like to do it now? Who needs these bouquets in the village? They're only made of weeds, except after weeding. And who's talking about the village? Garrett sat up straight. I'm asking you, do you want to or not? Of course I want to. Tess's eyes lit up. As they say, it's not harmful to dream, it's harmful not to dream. Garrett took her hand. Tess, come with me. Where to? The stunned woman looked at him. To the city, where else? What am I supposed to do there? I only need to get the divorce certificate there, and then I'll return here. While I have money, I need to buy firewood for the winter. Then it'll be fall. I'll clean out the garden, prepare it for the season. Tess, you don't understand. Garrett looked the woman in the eye. I'm inviting you to my place, to live with me. What do you mean? Tess frowned. Don't pretend, the man smiled. You know perfectly well what I mean. Tess, we're not children anymore. We don't need a long courtship. I like you very much as a woman and as a person. I feel it's mutual. Why drag it out? You're alone. I'm alone. We can be together. That's all there is to it. Together? Tess was surprised. Wait, are you seriously offering me a relationship now? Don't you want it? I'm rarely wrong about people, and I think you like me. If that's the case, I don't see any obstacles. I'd hate to leave you here. I'm getting used to you. Seeing each other once a year? That's silly. You've got nothing keeping you here. You haven't even bought chickens, dog or cat yet. So why don't you just drop everything and come back with me? I'm not forcing you. If you say no, I understand. Yes, I have a dog and a daughter, but Russell loves you. And Piper? I think she'll like you too. She's hardly ever home. If you two have a conflict, I'll get my daughter her own place. Besides, she'll probably prefer that to spending time with her old dad. Her old dad, laughed Tess, blushing. I don't even know what to say, Garrett. This is very unexpected. We've only known each other for a month. It's not appropriate to just suddenly start living together. What's wrong with it? Don't you believe in love at first sight? I thought that's what all women dreamed of. Well, not at first sight, but at second sight. Aha! The man didn't let her finish, grabbing Tess's hands childishly. So, you love me? Garrett, she laughed. Why do you ask? I may love you, but... Tess, there can't be any buts. Do you love me? If you do, come with me. I've been burned many times in my life and even shut myself off from people to some extent. But as soon as I saw you... Right away? How could I not? You should have seen yourself with that crowbar in your hands, standing there, all red, sweaty, angry, but determined to take the most decisive action. And that's the woman of your dreams, laughed Tess. Most people would run away from someone like that, or risk getting hurt. Well, Tess, as they say, to each their own. So, will you come with me? I will, Tess answered after a moment's thought. If you're really not kidding, then I'll go with you to the ends of the earth. Are you going to take the florist course? What? I said, are you going to take the course? Yes, I understand. Tess didn't let him finish. Of course I'll go. I have just enough money that Dylan left. It should cover the training. That's great. Garrett hugged the woman tightly. Dreams must be fulfilled, or we'll die unsatisfied and full of regrets. Garrett, Tess asked timidly, what's your dream? It has just come true, laughed the man. I once wished on a falling star to meet a wife with whom I could live all my life without knowing sorrow. Garrett, Tess slapped his chest with her palm. Don't joke like that. I'm serious, Tess. You're my truest dream, and I'll never give you any reason for offence. Do you believe in fate? I don't know. I do. I may be a concrete and serious person, but I'm a romantic to the core, and I believe everything in the world happens for a reason. I thought about not coming this year because I had a lot to do, but at the last moment I changed my mind. I felt something important was waiting for me here, something my future fate depends on. And you see, I wasn't mistaken. A year passed. Are you ready? Garrett looked into his wife's bedroom. Tess stood in front of the mirror, trying to put a graceful earring in her ear. She wore a beautiful floor-length evening dress that spectacularly showed off her slender figure. Yes, my love, just a minute. I can't get it in. Let me help you. Garrett was immediately beside Tess and put the earring on her in a couple of seconds. You're adorable. Tess, are you sure you want to go? Yes, the woman answered without hesitation. I feel like I have to, and I'd like to see his face. I agree. Garrett smiled and gently kissed his wife. The car glided along the evening highway toward the restaurant. Pulling into the parking lot, Garrett turned off the engine and once again gazed admiringly at his wife. Tess, you're my beauty. Now everyone will be jealous. Let them be jealous, smiled the woman. But envy is a bad quality. They got out of the car and headed towards the entrance of the restaurant. People were crowding near it. Many, seeing Garrett, said hello and shook hands. Tess's appearance attracted attention. A tall, spectacular brunette in an expensive dress with high heels. But most of all, her smile attracted attention. It was immediately clear that before you stood the happiest woman on earth. Inside, music was playing. A small string orchestra played modern melodies in the manner of symphonies. Waiters scurried between tables, serving all sorts of dishes to the guests. Yeah, he spent a lot of money, Garrett whistled. And they say a 40th anniversary isn't customary to celebrate. I did, but in a quiet family circle. They say superstition is a sign of weakness. I just don't understand why you have to spend so much money on an anniversary. It's like he's trying to show off. Well, probably he has nowhere to put his money anyway, sighed Tess. He lives alone. The kennel mistress left him 6 months ago. I guess he's trying to cheer himself up. Let him have fun. Is it a pity? Well, yes. It's just that I've always been amazed that people waste money so easily on idle amusements. I've always made good money, but I'm used to spending it only on necessities. I'm even more surprised that Dylan was so stingy with you. You deserve the best. Oh, there he is. Don't turn around yet. Garrett, how glad I am to see you, Dylan said, approaching them with almost open arms. And you've brought your wife? I'm overjoyed she managed to get out, because this woman is a mystery to all of us. There are so many rumours. Will you introduce us? We already know each other, Tess replied, smiling broadly and turning to her ex-husband. Happy birthday, Dylan. Here, accept our present for you. Tess handed the surprised Dylan a small decorated box. Why are you frozen like a stranger? She continued, realizing that the man was paralyzed. Tess, you? Have I really changed that much in a year? Laughed the woman. But Tess is my spouse now. Let's leave everything on your mind in the past. Garrett patted him on the shoulder. And Dylan, Tess interrupted her husband. I want to congratulate you with all my heart on your anniversary, whatever it may be. May everything work out well for you. And I wish you to find a worthy woman who can make you true. I want to eat. I have such an appetite. You can't imagine how hungry a pregnant woman can be. Tess took her husband under her arm and headed towards their table. And Dylan remained standing with his mouth open, holding a beautiful box in his hands.